potential litigation. And Councilmember Smith, would you like to make a
Yes.
motion?
Yes, I'd like to make a motion to extend time to review FCC Form 394 to relating to the request to transfer the Frontier Communications franchise to Northwest Fiber LLC, and authorize the city manager and his designee to continue negotiating the transfer request. And that's it.
So there's a motion in front of you. I'll second it. Is there any discussion? This is dealing with Frontier Communications in the city and some franchise agreements. And so anyway, we are wanting to extend the time that we can negotiate this. So will the clerk please take the roll?
Councilmember Denuski?
Yes.
Councilmember Curtis?
Yes.
Councilmember Marshall?
Yes.
Councilmember Shrubnik?
Yes.
Mayor Baker?
Yes.
Deputy Mayor Herbig?
Yes.
Councilmember Smith?
Yes.
Okay, we're now out of executive session. And if the clerk would please take the roll.
Mayor Baker?
Here.
Deputy Mayor Herbig?
Here.
Councilmember Smith?
Here.
Councilmember Shrubnik?
Here.
Councilmember Marshall?
Present.
Councilmember Denuski?
Here.
Councilmember Curtis?
Present.
If you will all please stand and join me in the flag salute. I pledge allegiance to the flag All right. We have two members leaving us. And I'm sad and sorry to see them go. They have both been such a tremendous asset to this council and to the community. And the two council members are leaving us are Brent Smith and Councilmember Stacey Denuski. They have both been tireless advocates for the city. And since they've been in office, here is a little bit of what they have helped accomplish. The creation of North Shore Summit Park, including the community build of the entire play structure. The community process and negotiation that led up to the sale and development of the Kenmore Village properties and Kenmore Camera, Spencer 68, the Link, Seaplane Restaurant, and the Flyway. They were involved in the new town square and hangar building, in the Jack Crawford Skate Park, in the new downtown sidewalks on both 68th and 181st Street. The Target Zero resolution to eliminate pedestrian and bicycle fatalities and serious injuries by 2025. The approval of the old St. Edward's Seminary building restoration, now known as the Lodge at St. Edward's Park. The completion of the SR 522 West A segment from 61st to 65th Avenue. Marijuana regulations, regional business zoning, Kenmore Business Incubator, the establishment of a transit-oriented district and zoning overlay, the Tweet property acquisition at the confluence of the Sammamish River and Swamp Creek, adding to and becoming part of Squires Landing Park. New waterfront recreation programs at our waterfront parks. The completion of the Tolt Trail construction. Inclusion of bus rapid transit through Kenmore in the Sound Transit 3 package. The Imagine Kenmore initiative that led to a voter approval of the Walkways and Waterways bond measure. Rhododendron Park boardwalk and dock completion. For the Love of Kenmore, Kenmore History Mural, and many other community co-creator projects. Parental leave policy for city employees. 62nd Avenue sidewalks. 202nd and 66th Avenue sidewalks, 153rd Avenue sidewalks, the Fish Passage Culvert on 192nd Street, Mary's Place, and Stacey was particularly involved with the YMCA Summer Lunch Program, where we feed a bunch of disadvantaged children in the community with free lunch for the entire summer. The Mobile Home Park Preservation Ordinance, Housing Strategy Plan, Puget Sound Energy Power Reliability, the KGM Settlement Agreement, Lake Point, events including Play Day, Why I Love Kenmore, summer concerts, 4th of July fireworks, tree lighting festival, and many more. And the Brent was quite active in the ball field and the improvements at Morelands Park there at the elementary school, and transitioned public works operations from contracting with Lake Forest Park to in-house. Local road safety plan, neighborhood transportation plans, including over 90 pedestrian-friendly projects completed in 15 different neighborhoods. Plastic bag ordinance, critical areas ordinance, the shoreline master program, surface water master program, the 20th anniversary celebration, rent increase notification ordinance, the establishment of the North Shore Emergency Management Coalition, Standard & Poor's AAA bond rating, conservative clean audits during all of their years on the city council, and multiple playful city awards. First Lady Michelle Obama, Let's Move recognition, gold medals in all 5 of the Let's Move cities and towns and counties goals. Became the 2nd city in the U.S. to become a Let's Move All-Star. Bike-friendly community designation, walk-friendly community designation, Complete Streets Award, the Governor's Smart Cities Award for downtown creation, 4 Association of Washington Cities Municipal Excellence Awards, and Puget Sound Regional Council Vision 2040 Award for the creation of downtown Kenmore. And trust me, there's a lot more. They've been very active since their initial election, and like I said before, they have contributed substantially to this city and to this council. And their tenure has been pretty awesome, and I think we're all going to be sorry to see them go, but we're excited to see the new people come on and the change that will be coming. So, thank you. Brent, would you like to say something? That's
so
why
true.
she asked you to go first.
No, that's okay. Yeah, it's been a big honor to be on this council. It's been a lot of fun and a lot of work. I've learned so many new things that, I just don't learn in my, day job as a flight test engineer. So it's been so neat to be involved in so many different aspects of the city. It's been an honor to work with all of you. Everybody here is so dedicated. You should be thankful that you have elected officials that care so much. And one thing I really appreciate that I didn't even really recognize before is how much effort the staff of the city puts in. It is incredible how much work they do. So I just want to say that thank you to all for what you do and for helping me out through all these last 6 years. And thank you to the city manager, who's really taken this city skyward since I came on this council. And thank you to Dawn for all of your incredible advice. And thank you to my family for putting up with all the time that it's taken to do this. So thank you, Murat, Ryan, and Luke.
Well, I will miss you too, Stacey. We have a dog food jar on our kitchen counter at home. And when I feed my dog, Hattie, I take a few scoops from the jar and put it in her bowl. Sometimes I intentionally drop a little kibble bit on the floor. The joy my dog gets from scrambling on the floor to eat that one little kibble is significantly greater than the joy she would get if we were in the bowl with the rest of the meal. For us here, it would be like finding that extra French fry in the bottom of the McDonald's bag. It just brings simple happiness to the moment. As a city and as a council, I appreciate that we understand what kind of joy and happiness can come from the simple little things like the falling kibble or the salty fry. Now let me step back a bit in time. Over 8 years ago, I ran for city council to increase the civility and camaraderie on Kenmore's council. More than anything else, my focus was on council civility and friendliness. Simply put, I wanted my family and others to live in a respectful and enjoyable city where the example was set from the top. And it really was about good people, having fun, being friendly toward one another, and as they created policy and worked through city budgets. I know I'm sounding pretty idealistic right now, but today we have that, and I am proud to have been part of the process to get there. We really do have fun, and I love that you laugh with me as well as at me. One of Edward R. Murrow's journalists, one of Murrow's boys, Eric Severide, said, "Next to power without honor, the most dangerous thing in the world is power without humor." Back then, our city was lacking humor and fun. Heck, we used to have the police chief sit in on every one of our council meetings. And as an observing citizen, there were many embarrassing moments because of that. You can look at other city councils or our own history to know that it hasn't always been this good, and it's good now. So shortly after getting on the council, I was thrilled to have the opportunity to take part in the hiring of Rob Carlincy, our city manager. In the recruiting process, we were each individually asked what qualities and attributes we wanted in a city manager. Among the obvious features, like good financial discipline and growing economic opportunities and environmental concerns, we in Kenmore would all want. I said I wanted somebody with a sense of humor. Because as Mark Twain once said, humor is a great thing, the saving thing after all. The minute it crops up, all our hardness yield, all our irritations and resentments flit away, and a sunny spirit takes their place. Well, I don't know if all that actually happened when Rob was hired, but I do know we got our guy, and we got Rob, and he is an incredible asset to the city. I've been blessed to have the joy of working with this class act for nearly 8 years, and I will miss working with Rob more than any other part of my council duties. Our city is incredibly fortunate to have him. While the council may have allocated funds, it was Rob who had the wisdom to bring Peter Gayama to the city to embrace fun and to teach us what it takes to love where we live, to have fun in Kenmore, and to love Kenmore. Peter Kageyama had arrived, or before Peter Kageyama had arrived, I knew things were changing when soon after being on the council, I walked out of an executive meeting, and Nancy Owsley, our assistant city manager, said to me, "Brent, it's so good to hear laughter in that room again." Nancy, I cannot tell you how much those words meant at that time. It meant we were having fun again, and that would make accomplishing council goals and initiatives that much easier. So thank you. I recently was on the phone talking with our mayor, and David Baker, he said to me, he said, "Brent, even though you talk one hell of a lot, we're going to miss you." And thanks, David, you are correct, I do. And because of that, once I'm off the council next month, your meetings will be considerably shorter, and you might actually make it home to watch the fourth quarter of Monday Night Football. Nevertheless, because of time sensitivity, I won't go through and speak about each one of my peers up here on the council. But I can tell you, I've learned something from each of you, and I've absolutely appreciated the time we have had together. Even when we disagreed, I've usually been able to take away something positive from you or from the discussion. I have benefited personally from our time spent together. It has been productive, and it has been meaningful to our city, and it's been fun. My hope is that you and future councils will continue on this path of civility and not allow divisiveness and vitriol to creep into deliberations or into the process of conducting our city's business. We are all passionate about Kenmore, or we would not be sitting up here. Keep up the great work, and keep battling over the ideas and not over the people. We know there will always be detractors because that comes with this job. Our community has high expectations for the seven of us, and they should have high expectations. I would expect nothing less. Obviously, fun and humor have their time and place, and citizen concerns clearly need to be dealt with in a straightforward and effective manner. I get that, and I think all of us up here get that. They are our customers, and we take their concerns and issues seriously. But just because we deal with weighty and emotional issues does not mean that we can't bring a little lightness and levity to the process. A heavy issue does not require a heavy attitude. It requires openness, creativity, and an ability to communicate. I simply ask that you do not forget the fun and the humor that can exist in all business, including city business. You may not know it, but Stanford's Graduate School of Business offers business courses on humor with the goal of teaching the power and the importance of humor to make and scale positive changes in the world, and also, surprise, to achieve objectives, build more effective and innovative organizations, cultivate stronger bonds, and capture more lasting memories. Wow, let's keep that thought alive in this city. The more fun we make it, the more likely we will continue to get good people to run for city council, and the more likely that we will continue to recruit great city staff and even great city managers like Rob. When we have fun, Kenmore wins. Now I'd like to publicly thank my wife Brenda and my kids Carly and Cooper for bringing immense joy and love and fun to my family and to my life. You are the best, and you actually get what I'm about. I ask that you don't forget to laugh and smile, and most of all, don't forget to drop the occasional kibble on the floor just to keep life fun and exciting. And in conclusion, I have a gift for our city manager and for our city. And so I had a sign made up. It says, attention, City of Kenmore is a fun zone. We encourage all spontaneous smiling, uncontrollable laughter, deliberate kindness, natural courtesy, and that.
All right. You guys can join me up there by the flags. We got a couple of things for you. If I get the council up here, because I'll just. Let's take. Kenmore City Council is back in session. The next item on the agenda is a presentation and regional update of Sound Transit, Bus Rapid Transit. Luke Lamon, I know you're joined by two others. Yeah, light needs to be on.
Great. Thank you, Mayor Baker, Deputy Mayor Herbig, and Council. How's that? There we go. Thank you very much for having us this evening. As Mayor Baker said, my name is Luke Lamon with Sound Transit, Government Relations Manager, joined by my colleagues Juan Kaloff, Senior Land Use Planner, and Paul Cornish, our BRT Program Director. So we're here tonight to give an overview of where we're at with this project, which will include a brief overview just to make sure that everybody's grounded kind of in the general aspects of the project. And then Juan's going to take a little bit of a deeper dive on the collaborative work that we've been doing, both with your city staff and staff from many other agencies over at the Park and Ride to encourage transit-oriented development. So with that, I'll hand it over to Paul.
Great, thank you, Luke. We appreciate you letting us be here tonight. It's been a while since we've been here, but what I first wanted to start with is to let Councilmember Smith know the first time I met Rob, maybe a year and a half ago on the BRT, we started thinking about which the BRT stations look like. And his answer was, well, make them fun. So that message loud and clear as we move forward. What I wanted to do today is just give you a quick update on the BRT, the Bus Rapid Transit, where we're at. And then Juan's going to talk a little bit about the parking garage and the partnerships we've had with the city and King County Metro and others to see what we can do in addition to the parking. How can we have some sort of transit-oriented development up there? And then I want to talk a little bit about the look ahead and what we'll be doing next, particularly as we start next year. So this is a map that you've seen before, which outlines the 522 145th BRT, which will start on the left side of the page at the under construction light rail station that Linwood Link is building in South Shoreline. We'll go along 145th, which is also State Route 523. And then we'll head up 523 and 522, Lake Forest Park, Kenmore, then out to Bothell into I-405. And what we've shown in this box here, this is the piece that's in Kenmore. There's not, you have existing business and transit lanes through the city of Kenmore, which is nice. Thank you. Thank you very much. We don't have to build those part. We just get to tie into that. But what we do have that's been a change in this last year, we've been working on the design, advancing the design. I want to give a shout out to Ms. Owsley, who's been Nancy. Oops, I broke it. Who's been helping us advance the design. And if you look at this map, you can see there's 4 dots in the box, 2 blue dots and 2 orange dots. And the orange dots were the original BRT stations that were defined, described for this project. And they were in the project, still in the project. And the blue dots at 61st and also at, I think it's 80th, as we work through the transit integration effort with King County Metro and staff. And so, well, we might want to add 2 more stations. We're calling these provisional stations. They're not in the Sound Transit 3 project, but they make a lot of sense for various reasons. And so we're actually analyzing those, figure out on the design what it would take to build those, look at the pros and cons, and include those in the environmental documentation, the SEPA checklist we'll be doing. And then next year, when we go back to the board for the project to be built, we'll see if this is something that they want to consider adding to the program. Like I said, they're not funded, but we're doing some work now, and there's some also provisional stations along the way. So the board can decide if they want to fund those or not. But that's a change in Kenmore. So if you wonder what those dots were. A couple other things I'd like to point out just to the east of us, over in Bothell, you've probably noticed some construction going on. That is business and transit lanes that are being built. They're funded by Sound Transit. The construction is being managed by the city of Bothell. This was the intent when Sound Transit 3 was put together. The city had done the design, acquired the property, and now we're working in partnership to build it. So that's a big point. I like to point that out because I like to say the BRT is already under construction. Mayor Baker, I think, was there at the groundbreaking for that as well.
Paul, do you mind
Sure.
if we ask questions during this, or
Oh, that's, sure.
Deputy Mayor?
So a quick question, something that jumped out at me looking at this map is the BRT routes in black, and it looks like it's now stopping at 405, and then there's continuing service. Originally the plan was that every other bus was going to go over to Woodinville. Is this still that plan, or is this something different?
You're correct. Great observation. The original plan was to take every other 522 BRT bus out to Woodinville, and there weren't any capital improvements as part of that. And we've been working with our service planners in the city of Woodinville to see if there's actually a better way to serve Woodinville than every other 522 BRT. So I think we're up about 3 options that we've taken to the city, and we've been working with them to see if that, 'cause we think there's a more efficient way and better service to Woodinville by doing something different than every other 522.
Okay, thanks.
And as long as we're over on the 405, the other thing I like to point out that we've been doing the last year is figuring out just where the 522 BRT and the I-405 BRT lines are going to connect. And we went through this big effort. We went to both, I think it was 2 snow days and 2 actual full days of conversation. And the 522 and the 405 BRTs are going to meet at the what will be rebuilt State Route 522 and I-405 interchange. We took this idea to both the elected leadership groups for the 405 and 522. Mayor Baker, Deputy Mayor Herberg were part of that, and that made some good sense. That was good because it turned out to be much more complicated than you would think, how to get these 2 lines to meet and how they're going to serve campus and how we're going to serve Bothell and what we're going to do with the Woodinville piece. So we're pretty excited about that. So in a nutshell, we've been advancing the design. We're at this 10% plan, but the big kind of outstanding part is how we're going to work with the Kenmore Park and Ride, and that's what Juan's going to talk about. This last little slide that shows in blue square, those are the 2 provisional stations I talked about that we're doing the work on to take to our board to see if this is something they want to consider funding next year. And then in yellows, the existing station pairs that are still in the project, and that lower left one is 73rd Avenue, which is down by the Kenmore Park and Ride. And that is actually a nice segue to what Juan would like to take you through now.
Thanks, Paul. Yeah, so during the beginning of Phase 2, we were approached by both King County Metro and the city to explore potential future TOD opportunities that would be compatible with the ST3 planned parking garage at the existing Kenmore Park and Ride. And while this effort has been truly collaborative, it's a partnership not only of Sound Transit, the city of Kenmore, KC Metro, but also there's funding partners for affordable housing like Arch and King County Metro's TOD funding through DCHS. And we've had as stakeholders, part of the process has also been the property owners that have been at the table. So that has been very, very exciting and successful so far. We've conducted three workshops during the summer and fall, and each workshop was very well attended. We actually used this space right here to do all 3 workshops. Thank you. And the 4th workshop will be happening next year sometime. We expect mid-January or 2020. The 3 goals for the workshop so far have been to first determine how to locate the parking garage and support a potential future urban design or urban development framework, which so far we have explored multiple garage locations and have a preferred concept with the potential to include both agencies, KC Metro and ST's goals, while preserving opportunities for TOD and thus creating a transit integrated structure, which you will see in the next slide. The second goal was to collaborate in this visioning and evaluation process with the objective of achieving a coordinated development plan that will set the development opportunities for properties in the future around the park and ride and the future BRT station. And the third goal is really to align these public investments and achieve the best possible outcome for the Kenmore and surrounding community. As I mentioned, some of the next steps is to conduct our 4th workshop, and we'll be at that point bringing back some of the findings of the TOD feasibility studies, and we are currently meeting one-on-one with stakeholders, including the city, KC Metro, and private property owners. The 4th workshop will be an opportunity to discuss this TOD implementation strategies and identify some of the delivery options of how this can take place, and including how to address the funding gap to achieve this project and vision. Next slide. the site plan in front of you is the 10% design concept plan that we had so far. This is the baseline project. This is the preferred garage configuration, and what it does is that it has a wider footprint than the original representative project that can accommodate KC Metro's program and not preclude the future TOD west of the transit facility. You can see in pink. This allows for more of the state-of-the-art integrated transit facility while preserving that opportunity. The program is as follows. It's nine bus layover spaces on that ground floor of the garage, and that's a double height floor, so it would accommodate for the capacity to have the buses in there with the clearance. And then there's 2 active bus bays and pickups. The pickup and drop-off locations within that facility, as well as one paratransit space for KC Metro service. And then the outside on the exterior, if you will, the SR 522, you would have 3 on-street active bays for KC Metro, and that's where the Stride BRT would be along the 522 westbound. Inside the facility, there would also be comfort station for bus drivers. As far as the parking, we are assuming that we're bringing 300 stall garage. We have a design that currently allows for 187 stalls per floor, and we have given a 3-bay garage footprint in order to accommodate the bus facility on the ground floor. But what's currently happening is that we have at least 2 floors of parking at 374 stalls, expandable if additional third-party funding is available, up to 748 stalls. So the maximum capacity of the garage is 748 stalls, and this would represent an additional 20% of the stall count that's there, which is 627 stalls at the current park and ride today.
So I get some clarification
Yes.
on that, please. My understanding was it was going to be a 300-stall garage plus the existing spaces that we already have.
Right.
So with this concept you're showing here, it looks like we're going to lose a bunch of stalls that are existing. And will those be made up plus the 300?
So we are contemplating different configurations for that. The ability right now is to have 374 stalls on a garage that would essentially have the ability to accommodate up to 748. If we have 3 floors, that's if you have 4 floors, that's 748 stalls. If you have 3 floors, you're already netting at 300, and if you have 4, it's already 400 plus.
So you have 300 stalls in the garage the way it is currently designed, but what about all the stalls you're losing?
We are in the process of analyzing all that, but there is some displacement of stalls, and the idea would be that those would be integrated in the floors above, if additional third-party funding is available as well.
Right, and so what I was always under the impression was, like I said, the existing stalls plus 300 new without third-party funding. So that's changed.
I don't know if it's changed. We've looked at that, and if it's 300 net or if it's 300 new, and it was not really defined as that. What we're looking to do is, what Juan is alluding to, is the recommended site project was to put a 300 stall parking garage in there. Now we're looking at how can we work with Metro and other folks who want to put TOD to actually go above that and accommodate the site. But that's kind of the question we're working on, is how much parking is affordable, about what makes the most sense, because we know we have these transit-oriented development goals as well. So how do we, in partnership, put together something that meets all those goals? And it's a work in progress, and again, a special shout out to your staff and Metro and others on what makes the most sense for this site.
Okay, Deputy Mayor?
I mean, I think maybe the question that the mayor's asking, I'll try to rephrase it. What if you're just building the Sound Transit 2 floors, what is the net gain of parking total? I think that's what he's trying to get at.
Right. So if we're building just 2 floors with the configuration that we have so far at 187, we're netting 115. If we have 3 floors, we're netting 302. That's what I was trying to say earlier. So our hope is that we're gonna be able to achieve through the partnership the three levels at a minimum, and then if we're at the fourth floor, then we're increasing the capacity to 20%.
But 3 floors with third-party funding, or not?
Well, that has to be determined, as Paul is saying.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks. And then, okay, so we,
Yeah, well, just a couple more.
Brent,
Councilmember
please.
Smith and Councilmember Curtis.
So can you explain what would trigger the additional floor construction with the third-party funding?
so KC Metro is contemplating the potential to essentially reposition the property that they're leasing right now with St. Vincent de Paul, which accommodates 227 spaces, and there could be essentially funding coming from that would essentially help fund the additional floor.
So if that doesn't come through by the time that you want to,
Right.
at what point do you want to have your plan beyond just a concept?
Well, I think we're Q1 to spring to Q2 of next year, we're going to be sort of memorializing this and trying to come to agreements with our partners.
Okay, because it just, I mean, just through economies of scale, to be able to construct a 4th floor on a 3-story garage, it just seems really short-sighted to not to do that up front.
Right.
Because we know, and we all know, we don't have a hard line coming to Kenmore, and so once the 3rd floor is in design and that's what's set in stone, we know it'll never come back because you're going to have
Right.
much higher costs that have to be met rather than want to be met.
Right, you're absolutely correct, and that's why we want to get an agreement or letter of concurrence with Metro or other partners. So when we go back next year to the board with, here's a project to be built, here's the pros and cons of various provisional stations, here's the deal for Kenmore Park and Ride, here's the deal for the Lake Forest Park rides. You're exactly right, and we don't want to be short-sighted, we don't want to sell this thing short, so we want to have all these agreements lined up so when we actually move this project forward, here's the whole picture, and here's what we're looking to do, and we're looking to do with our partners.
Okay, and I do hope that in that consideration, it does come back to what you said in your opening comments about the fact we've already built those lines in the roadway, and so that's a significant savings that we already undertook, that I would hope that has some value in your decision-making going forward. Thank you.
Councilmember Curtis.
So kind of a related question. How many spaces are being displaced with this garage?
That's a great question. In our initial study, the area that you see that's essentially the footprint of the garage for the 3-bay wide garage, it's about 65,000 square feet. And that first calculation that we did was estimated over 250 stalls that were displaced.
So if we displace 250 and we add 300 or whatever, that doesn't seem like a huge net gain.
Right. So the calculus is 187 per floor. So we are essentially going from a capacity of 374 minimum, which is 115 net increase, which we know it's less than 300 net. But then when you get to the 3rd floor, which I think from our initial conversations with Casey and the partners, we're getting there. To 3 floors, we're already netting at 302, and then from there on, it's the 400 plus. So,
All right, thank you.
thank you. The next slide, I am showing here pay your attention to the potential TOD parcels, which are the boxes in pink. The baseline project would include at a minimum 1 TOD parcel, and with the hope of this arriving similar timeline to the transit project. This parcel is estimated at 1 acre right now, which is west of the conceptual garage location. And then if you total all the other parcels, there could be up to 4 acres of potential future TOD and the surrounding combined sites. The sort of the totality of the vision here would include both TOD that's done by others, or we call it community TOD, or also agency TOD, which is supported by either Sound Transit in this case or KC Metro, doing that process, which would be the agency TOD. This could represent up to, we're thinking between 300 and 400 units of housing that could be accomplished here. And this also would include the affordable housing required by the city's already inclusionary zoning, which is, I think, 10% the required units. And the affordable housing funders at the table have been part of this process, and we are thinking of strategies of how to maximize the opportunity for affordable housing, and really understanding what the funding gaps will be as we move in this next phase. The current garage plan that's shown would allow to relocate, as I mentioned before, if additional process by KC Metro is taken for relocating their surface parking from the St. Vincent de Paul into the new garage and allowing for future redevelopment of their parcel. And I would also say that the workshop series also explored potential for a new east-west pedestrian-oriented road. And you see from the middle of the site, and this would provide the opportunity for a new pedestrian-oriented street with opportunities for public realm enhancements and strengthen the pedestrian environment there, as well as a north-south boon earth, if you will, or pedestrian-only street that could run north-south across the site. Again, this is a super exciting collaboration so far with the city and KC Metro and partners to optimize the site that's supporting the transit, parking, and TOD goals. But we also recognize that this is a change from our original ST3 contemplated project, and so we're working with our partners to close the potential gap on funding and help to set the stage to achieve the TOD outcomes. Thank you.
So, actually, before I talk about the upcoming outreach, as Swan said, that park and ride is very complicated with the TOD, and there's a lot of opportunities out there. And I think we just threw a whole bunch of information at you very quickly, and maybe we can talk about later next year, which I'll get to in our next steps. About Juan alluded to the workshop 4 as we start to wrap this up and come up with a plan. Maybe we can come back and actually take you through some more detail on that, because I could tell that we were throwing this is very important to all of us, and we were giving you a lot of information in a pretty quick manner. So that's something you can think about, and maybe we can work with Rob on that and getting on your agenda later, sometime next spring after that last workshop, and give you a little more detail. Maybe have some more graphics and some more discussion. If that works for you, I'd like to throw that out there as an offer that we could make to you. So with that being said, there are property impacts to the BRT. Not a lot of property impacts in Kenmore. As Councilmember Smith and I have been talking about, a lot of the bat lanes have been built in Kenmore, but we are impacting properties, and what we're going to start doing is sending out letters to potentially impacted properties. We have the 10% design, we have some lines on some maps. We're going to send letters out to these property owners and offer to talk with them, and we meet with them. Often we go to their houses. If this picture, this is from a property up in Shoreline, that's one of our lead engineers out there on the site with the property owner, and just talking about what's going on their site, what the potential impact might be, how they use their site, and how we, as we move forward in our design, how we can work in partnership with the property owners as we move forward. We want to be very transparent with this and very open with this, and those letters will be going out. And we've been working through our interagency work group meetings on the schedule when the letters will be going out. They'll be keeping everybody informed. Rob will know. I think Rob probably works with the council. Just when these letters go out, because we realize that this is an important things to folks. We like to get ahead of it. We like to have the opportunity to work with them as we progress the design and just let everybody know what we are doing. So the next week look ahead, like I said, we're going to next year's look ahead. Going to finalize the 10% design. We're looking to go to the board next spring with David Evans is the consultant that's working on this design to move into 30% design, because this really goes back to the property impacts. We want to be advancing the design as we're talking to property owners to keep everybody looping and connected as we move forward. Park and Ride Garage Workshop 4 that I just talked about, and then continue just to work on how we can make the TOD and on all of this work. Probably in the second quarter, we'll finish our environmental review, which will be a SEPA checklist. We're going to have a series of online open houses and pop-up events. And pop-up events are smaller gatherings. We invite folks to come and talk to us, learn about the project. I expect a lot of those will be across the street at the hangar, which has been a very, very popular place for us to hold open houses. And then we'll finish out the rest of the year just working on the design and working on the design. We don't do it in the vacuum. We do that with the cities, the property owners, and anyone who's interested in our, gets on our mailing list for open houses to get them included on that. So that's what we're looking to do. Last year, we refined the project, talked about what we want to do with some of the stations. Bothell got some stuff starting construction for us, which is great. We started this whole TOD and Kenmore Park and Ride discussion, which is great. I think we're going to continue that. And then we're going to move into the 30% design and continue moving this project forward. And that's all I had today, and we'd love to entertain any more questions that you might have.
Hey, Councilmember Curtis.
So one of the things I don't quite understand is the bus station itself. So it's raised, so people have to take a few steps up, is my understanding, so they can have direct access onto the bus. What happens to the pedestrians? So especially I'm interested in this corner right here. Do they walk around the station? Especially somebody with disabilities, you wouldn't want them going up on the station and then back off again. I don't understand how the pedestrian space is maintained.
That's a fantastic question. You must have been in the meeting I was at today where we had that same discussion. So we're looking for the platform heights to be 9 inches. Your standard curb right now is 6 inches. We're looking to make them all 9 inches. And so they'd be ramped up. We wouldn't have steps, but we'd ramp them up in the sidewalk. And on the 522 stops, that's the exact question is, if you have room, you can put the sidewalk behind the shelter in the stop. If you don't, maybe you have to make a wider platform in front of the shelter to accommodate through traffic. But that's the exact sort of stuff we'll be looking at as we take this 10% design and move to 30%. That's how we get the grades to work to get up to the higher curb, how pedestrians just coming through. Are they going to be behind the station, in front? How much room do we have? Is your building in the way? That's the exact sort of thing that we're going to be looking at. That's a fantastic question and the exact sort of thing that we'll be looking at as we move the design forward.
Thank you.
Looking at your crystal ball, on this last slide you showed your 30% design at the end of 2020. Given that there's a theoretical implementation with actual passengers riding in 2024, toward the end of 2024, when would you envision construction starting?
Well, that's a great question.
I'm not holding you to it. I'm just
Okay.
looking at your crystal ball.
I think we like I actually have a map schedule that shows the schedule. I think we're looking at construction, maybe start at 21, 22. It kind of depends. Like the parking garage and what we do at the Kenmore, could take conceivably longer than some of the modifications to the 9-inch curb. So we're looking at maybe 21, 22, and the BRT is a massive project between the 522 and 405. And so that's part of the schedule is when do we get the certain pieces going, because they all have to finish together and start at different times. But that's kind of my crystal ball.
Close enough.
All righty.
Thank you. Any other questions? Councilmember Sherman.
A question about whether you've looked at having TOD units on top of the garage, and that might help finance the 3rd and or 4th floors?
I'm going to defer this one to Juan.
So far, that's a great question. So far, we have been looking at the TOD as a separate element, not so much on top of the same structure, given the given the way that we have been conceiving the transit center as sort of a transit integrated state-of-the-art facility, and then the TOD opportunities would be essentially surrounding it. We did think of something of what we were calling the wrap, so essentially the building could partially wrap the facility. That could certainly be easier, but once you start having a multi-story structure, especially of that height, which starts getting above the 3 and 4 stories, it becomes difficult then to justify the number of units above. But certainly a wrap would kind of do the same type of type of goal of what you're suggesting.
Anything else? Thank you, gentlemen. Thank you very much.
Thanks a lot.
Yes, thank you very much.
Even though I hear it all the time, I still get more every time, so thank you for doing this.
You bet.
All right. Next item on the agenda is citizen comments. This is an opportunity to express your views on issues that are important to you and to the community, and we ask that you please limit your comments to 3 minutes. And please just don't repeat the same thing over and over. I mean, add something new to the conversation. And before you call the first person, I don't know if the agenda will stand approved as written unless anybody objects. With no objections, the agenda does stand approved the way written. All right, clerk, please call the first person.
Aria.
Hello.
Hello.
My name is Arya Mirzazadi. I'm a managing director of Washington Independence in Strategic Energy and Resources. Abbreviation is Wiser Company. And I'm also resident of city of Kenmore for last 20 years. And I want to thank Mrs. Deborah Sherbink. Before she got elected, she was helping me to work on the Solarize Kenmore project, which I'm bringing to the council members, hoping that with your moral support, we would be able to implement the solarization of city of Kenmore, especially after all the great changes that Mr. Rob Kalinsky has been done for the last 5-6 years, as I have witnessed it, which is very impressive. The situation we have, city of course of Kenmore is growing rapidly, and city is in the best situation to embrace renewable energy. Our target is residential, commercial, and organization, plus park and parkings. Our proposal is by organizing a group purchase or bulk buy, we can help Kenmore residents and businesses to achieve an affordable and successful solar installation in the city. Because solar is still, for individual home and householder, is expensive. We want to definitely help the community working together collaboratively and mutually share the cost of putting solar on the roof. So this plan might help the other cities also basically go with the idea and help the communities with the people with the lower income would be able to embrace renewable energy in city of Kenmore. So my company, it would be basically supporting the whole idea. I'm here to make sure the city is in alignment with such a move, and if we get the support from the city, not the funding support, no financial contribution, only moral basically support, or basically promoting the idea of renewable energy, because such an idea has been done in Craigland, in Snohomish, and also in all the cities from Portland to New York. So we want to definitely make sure we have your help and support. Thank you.
Thank you
You're
very
welcome.
much for coming.
Serena Freeman.
Natural spaces, like the ones found at St. Edward's
Can you
State
please state your name?
Oh, sorry. My name is Serena Freeman.
Serena
Freeman,
Freeman.
yes. Natural spaces, like the ones found at St. Edward's State Park, are disappearing all too quickly. Meanwhile, numerous medical studies are telling us what environmental advocates have known all along, that wild natural spaces are essential to our mental and physical health. As we humans face water scarcity, broken ecosystems, and the looming threat of climate change, the science is clear. We must practice sustainable habits and protect our natural spaces. A failure to do what we can for these places is not only wildly irresponsible, it is robbery. It is stealing a home that belongs to wildlife, and it is theft of a public sanctuary, a fresh water source, and a wealth of natural resources from our children. These places don't need to be developed, they need to be preserved. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Freeman.
Ms. Freeman, your child is also signed up to speak.
I can't remember what I was gonna say. My name's Will Coogan, and nature isn't just for humans. That's all I've got to say.
John,
Can I have her name, please?
I've got the name, Mayor.
Do you?
Yeah.
It is?
Yeah. Is it Rokugan? How do you?
Yeah, it's Rokugan.
John Hendrickson?
Hi, good evening, Council. John Hendrickson, Kenmore, Washington. Every 2 years, this City Council meets the first week of January and chooses a new mayor. I think it would be well served with a change in that position. You know, the mayor is not the chief executive officer. He's not the executive branch. He is not the president of this municipal corporation. The city manager is. What the mayor does is he chairs the meeting. He's supposed to help make it productive, have debate, have a healthy debate, and he speaks publicly for the council, so there's one voice. The level of public debate, deliberations, and critical thinking of this council is pretty much rates a 0 on a consistent basis. There's a chronic groupthink even when the public is being harmed. For example, we pay road taxes every year. For the 20 years we've been incorporated, that adds up to about $100 million. Yet the city says, led by the mayor, that there is no road tax being paid. You haven't paid anything for roads, and that's money for a different purpose. You couldn't even talk about road safety on this council. I was on the council for 8 years, until 3 pedestrians were killed over a 4-month period. Then the city started talking about pedestrian safety, but they still won't admit the road taxes we pay. Groupthink. The ball fields at St. Ed's. If you pay the $72,000 for the EIS in the budget, you will have paid $486,000 for this project for pre-development costs, starting in 2015. If you add in the pre-development costs from the 2008 effort, that brings it up to $588,000 of pre-development costs, all for the purpose of trying to get around complying with the environmental protection laws that the rest of them are subjected to. Okay. When we had Frolling's offered to build ball fields for us in 2006 over at Kenmore Elementary and 1 ball field over at Wallace Park, you rejected it. We couldn't even discuss it. When city staff gave us a memo falsely saying that the school district was against it when they weren't, we couldn't discuss that. Now currently we have a land use issue where you're trying to change accessory dwelling units to basically add another accessory dwelling unit, changing our residential zoning from 6 houses per acre to 12. You're going to still have a mother-in-law in the house and have another unit. You're using the Planning Commission to do that in an underhanded way. Only 2 people went to the public hearing on that. So, you know, you're degrading our quality of life over the long term. You're financially unstable because you're going to have this task force to try to fix what you've done with our budget. You've been living in a fantasy. Everything Brent Smith said to you, don't believe it. You know, he had
We're at 3
state
minutes,
parks
Mr. Hendrickson.
threatened to withhold permits if they didn't give him the ball field. You took the ball field at Morelands away from the elementary school kids, and I don't see the good humor or civility in any of that. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Hendrickson.
Vicky Grayland.
Hi, I'm Vicky Grayland. I live in Kenmore. First, I want to support what this man said about solarizing Kenmore. I worked on Solarize Kirkland as a volunteer with the Sierra Club a few years ago. It worked out really well. It cut the costs for people because they would do it by neighborhood. So it really cut the costs for individuals. And I encourage the council to include climate change on their agenda for their annual retreat. Last week, the legislation that People for Climate Action worked on with the King County Councilmember Claudia Balducci passed the full council. And I'm happy to report that's good news. The bill provides funding for a countywide climate action plan to be written probably within 6 months. And the countywide action plan would be available for member cities in the King County Cities Climate Collaboration, and Kenmore is a member. Part of the plan is that member cities would pay something when they use the plan that the county develops. I don't really know the specifics on the numbers, but I think that it would still be less money than writing our own individual plan. And moving forward on climate change, I'd like to stress that every decision we make has an impact on this. We need to preserve all of our wetlands, all of our natural soil, all of our trees. They are all natural carbon sinks. The plan for the ball fields at St. Edward's is still environmentally and fiscally irresponsible. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Grayland.
Whitney Newbauer.
Good evening. My name is Whitney Negebauer. Thank you for the opportunity to provide comments today. Sorry, I'm reading off my phone. My family and I spend close to 15 hours a week at St. Edward's State Park. We've enjoyed hours exploring the fields and surrounding wetlands, searching for frog eggs and critters that enjoy the marshy habitat. St. Edward's State Park is largely undeveloped and a natural area that holds regional importance and is special and unique. The field and wetlands are a crucial component of the larger ecosystem. Preserving and better yet, restoring these wetlands adjacent to healthy forest lands maintains connections between 2 habitats for animals that depend on large trees and wet areas. For example, birds that nest in the trees and also feed off insects that grow in the wetlands. This opportunity to protect and preserve contiguous habitats is without question rare in the city of Kenmore and should not be overlooked. In fact, 2 years ago, Governor Inslee formed an orca task force dedicated to reversing the dramatic decline in orcas and salmon that, yes, do depend on the health of Kenmore's watersheds. The final report included a recommendation to amend the Growth Management Act from a no net loss of habitat policy to a net ecological gain policy. It is Kenmore's opportunity here to be forward-thinking and smart with development. Losing this natural space would be detrimental to kids in an increasingly urban area. I'm sure all of you spent many more hours outside growing up and few hours indoors playing video games than kids do today. Research shows that our kids are disconnected from the natural world and quite literally are suffering from physical, emotional, and developmental consequences due to a lack of spending time in nature. My daughter uses the field to run and play, to search for frog eggs, developing curiosity. She plays family with her friends, developing social skills, developing her creativity, imagination. The quiet outdoor space at this park is perfect for unstructured time that the kids need. I won't deny that sports fields are not important for families. However, there are better places to locate these fields than in a natural area. There are also creative ways to leverage resources with the school districts and share field space. Economically, natural areas are cheaper to protect in the first place rather than to restore, and are also cheaper to maintain. Thank you so much for considering my comments today. And while I have 30 seconds left to go, I also want to stress the importance that these wetlands have for water quality. The leading cause of stormwater runoff and pollution in Puget Sound is stormwater runoff, toxins that come off of pavement, and the wetlands help to filter these out of the water, keep them out of salmon, and it's good for our kids and everyone else. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ms. Nickelbauer. So if I can please get you to hold your applause down. We've got a lot of people to get through. And if you want to applaud at the end, that's great.
Susan Carlson.
Thank you. Susan Carlson. I've been the main proponent of the Environmental Education and Research Center with a whole lot of support. I am a resident of Kenmore. So thank you, all the families from Camp Roots and others who are here this evening. I would like to suggest that as you listen to the stories of the families whose children make active and consistent use of the natural fields for education, that you keep in mind the many research-verified benefits gained by children who participate in environmental education. Experts at, again, Stanford University conducted a systematic literature review of 119 peer-reviewed studies conducted over a 20-year period that measured the impacts of environmental education on K-12 students. The review found clear evidence that environmental education programs provide a wide variety of benefits. Not surprisingly, the study clearly showed that students taking part in environmental education gain a greater understanding of the environment. However, studies also showed that demonstrated that environmental education led to a number of other gains, including increased academic performance, enhanced critical thinking skills, development of personal growth, and life-building skills, including confidence, autonomy, and leadership. In addition, a number of studies pointed to the environmental education leading to lasting civic engagement and positive environmental behaviors. Specifically, the Stanford Environmental Education Review pointed to knowledge gains across multiple disciplines, development of social emotional skills, including self-esteem, character development, and teamwork, environmentally friendly behaviors, including reduced water usage, recycling, participation in community stewardship events and projects, greater motivation to learn and enthusiasm for school, civic interest and engagement, including feelings of civic responsibility, empowerment, and ability to take action. So here's the thing. All of these positive youth development, academic, civic engagement, and next generation stewardship benefits could continue to be made available to the hundreds of students and families who are currently taking part in Camp Roots programs, and the 100 more students and families that will participate in the Environmental Education and Research Center programs at zero cost to the city, while at the same time the city could provide for its active recreation needs by optimizing already existing ball fields at school sites at a far less economic environmental cost than renovating the field at St. Edward State Park. If the city holds a vision for protection of its, quote, natural environmentally sensitive areas, significant open space, trees, air, and water as part of its 5-year comprehensive plan vision, I would ask that the city strongly consider making use of its existing natural resources that support development of next generation environmental stewards as among its priorities. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Carlson.
Phyllis Finley.
Phyllis Finley, Kenmore. You will soon be engaged in your annual retreat, and you will also soon be voting on the PROS plan that will set priorities for outdoor recreation planning for the next 6 to 20 years. Some of you have spoken about setting and clarifying your priorities at that retreat. I'm requesting that you shift your focus from your priorities to the priorities, interests, and needs of the community that you serve, which are most recently expressed in the PROS Plan survey. In fact, there have been at least 4 very clear messages to you communicated since 2015, stating that access to natural areas and reserves and nature trails are topmost priorities for Kenmore citizens. This information comes from the Imagine Kenmore Initiative, 2015, Walkways and Waterways Bond Survey, 2016, Kenmore Parks and Recreation Survey, 2019, and the PROS Plan Survey and Open House, 2019. None of these identified a multi-use athletic field as a high citizen priority. The city has spent almost $500,000 on planning and consultants for the St. Ed ball field, even though since at least 2015, it has been shown not to be a citizen priority. It is said that all time is lost that might be better employed. On what citizen priority might staff have been working instead of this? All that money is wasted that might be better spent. On what citizen priority might citizen tax dollars have been spent instead of this? You might answer, we're waiting for the EIS. Why? A SEPA EIS is not the driving force behind the ball field project. This answer gives the simplistic and erroneous impression that it's state parks that wants this project, as if the city has no agency in the matter. In fact, the project was initiated by the city and exists only because the city is promoting it and is bearing all the cost. You, as a council, are free to apply your judgment at any time to determine that the project is not in line with citizen priorities and not a fiscally responsible investment for the city or the community. Will an IES determination somehow confirm or disprove citizen priorities? No. Shouldn't citizen priorities, not an EIS guide your decision about spending? Yes. Let's pretend for a minute. The EIS concludes, no environmental issues here. Go ahead, destroy the wetland buffer, knock yourselves out. Well, Kenmore doesn't have the money to knock themselves out, and it's not a citizen priority. Or the EIS concludes, let's pretend, big environmental issue here, go ahead with the project, but mitigate by adding this, this, and this. Kenmore doesn't have the money to pay for this, this, and this, and it's not a citizen priority. I request that you align your priorities for projects and spending with those that ensure the health and safety of citizens, are fiscally responsible, and reflect the priorities of Kenmore citizens. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Finley.
Catherine Hales.
Hi, I'm Catherine Hales. I'm a teacher at Camp Roots Forest School at St. Edward State Park. So there's an impression that the field is underutilized, but Camp Roots alone spent over 300 hours of programming in this field over the 2018 to 2019 school year, and that's not counting daily use in summer camps by Camp Roots and other programs. That was 270 children and 83 adults during the school year who were able to utilize that space. So I wanted to speak to some of the things specifically that the field provides for us that we don't find elsewhere in the park. Frogs and salamanders breed in the water on the east edge of the field, and our preschool through middle school programs are able to observe the growth and change of the tadpoles each spring. There is no other place in the park where we've been able to observe tadpoles in our programs. The cottonwood trees provide amazing leaves in the fall, which the children catch from the air, rake into piles, fold into boats, and watch as they cover the ground. At least 10 of these cottonwood trees, which are growing in the wetland or wetland buffer, are proposed to be cut down. In the winter, the children have collected cottonwood buds from the field where they've fallen from the trees, which can be made into a salve or a healing ointment, teaching them about the beneficial properties of plants around us. The field is covered with water for several months of the year, typically November through March or more, providing incredible opportunities for mud and ice exploration, for tracking of water levels following rainfall, and for finding animal tracks in the soft mud. Our classes have observed deer and coyote in this field on multiple occasions and can find fresh tracks and or scat of these and other animals in the field on a daily basis. When the grass is allowed to grow unmowed for the first part of the spring, children in our programs run through and hide in the grass, lay back and watch the ravens, bald eagles, red-tailed hawks, flickers, pileated woodpeckers that fly overhead, and bask in the early spring sunshine in what feels like a wild field of their very own. We observe and study the many species of flowers and grasses that grow in this field and are able to watch the progression as they bloom and then seed, because the grass is allowed to grow for many more weeks in this field than any others in the park due to it being too wet to mow. The field has provided for wonderful studies of birds, including the robins and flickers that regularly flock to the muddy field to feed, the brown creepers, juncos, and kinglets that frequent the tall cedars and Douglas firs at the west edge of the field, the varied thrush that regularly visited the trees last winter, the pileated woodpeckers, hairy woodpeckers, and chickadees that are a near constant in the cottonwood trees and alders of the wetland, and the 3 junco nests that we came across in the long grass last spring. So basically, this field is valuable and is being used in its present state. It doesn't look like much, but it means a lot to us and to all the kids in our programs. Thanks.
Thank you. Would you please not with the applause? We really need to get through this. Save it for the end.
Dakota Rash.
Good evening, Council. My name is Dakota Rash. Thank you for the opportunity to speak tonight. I had a short written statement about the ball fields at St. Edward's. I'm in favor of leaving them as they are, but everything I was going to say tonight has already been more eloquently and in greater detail covered. So I will just please ask you to listen to what this group has been saying. Some of you may recognize me. I may make your coffee in the morning. And in that position, I've had the chance to hold conversations with a lot of your citizenry. And I know that this viewpoint expressed tonight is not a small one, is not uncommonly held. I know that a lot of people feel that this park should be left as is. I know that a lot of people, and myself included, feel that youth need a lot more outdoor engagement. And I think the point tonight that needs to be unstructured, well, not necessarily needs, but is very beneficial if it's unstructured and in connection with nature, is much more valuable. I know that from a perspective as a camp counselor at the Pacific Science Center, at Woodland Park Zoo, and at the National Park Service. We need to maintain our connection with nature. And the last perspective I'll speak from tonight is my perspective as a law student. You may have seen me reading in the back. I apologize for not necessarily paying complete attention, but I have finals tomorrow, and they have a reputation. I know that the EIS project is not always engaged in to not build something. Very infrequently is such an expensive and lengthy process engaged in to say, well, we're not going to do anything. We've determined that the environmental costs are too great and we're just not going to do anything. But I would encourage you, City of Kenmore, to break the trend. This city has shown that it wants to grow and that it wants to progress. And I think more and more in this day and age, we need to progress in a way that is environmentally conscious. And so I encourage you to have the courage and the maturity to embrace that trend and grow in that direction and leave this sacred green space as it is. Thank you.
Karen Prince.
Mr. Rash.
Good evening. I'm Karen Prince, Kenmore resident, and I could echo what he just said. I do have some remarks. And of course, it's about the ball field. I think a ball field is a great idea, but it's not here. And I think you all have heard me say this before. I'd like to press down on the matter that you haven't taken time or made the effort to, that you have rejected pursuing joint use agreements. They're called interlocal agreements with the North Shore School District. Kirkland, for example, has been able to create a city-school playfield partnership with the Lake Washington School District and has now completed several school field restoration projects for much less money than what Kenmore has spent. Most school field improvements would not need an expensive environmental impact statement. You probably already know, and this is another way you could get money, I just learned about this, that the city is eligible, you've already applied for grants, for the King County Youth and Amateur Grant Program in January of 2020. And I've got a flyer on that, and I'm going to leave it with my remarks. That they will fund up to 50% of the cost. That's probably nothing new to you, you know about it. But I want to bear down on the expense that we know that the city has acknowledged operating revenues are not keeping pace with the cost of doing business, and that it faces an upcoming structural deficit in its operating budget. And the ball field, as we know from previous speakers, has doubled to $5 million since 2016. $1 million in grant funding has been lost due to not being able to meet the milestones set by the grant issuers. We are glad to have our taxes pay for all the beneficial plans Kenmore is working on. We appreciate the open space, the parks, the walkways, etc. However, the Kenmore Ballfield proposal is not aligned with the environmental values the city claims. It strips away the living ecosystem from that meadow and replaces it with sterile plastic turf. All the mitigation in the world will not replace what is lost environmentally, and as it takes away the opportunities for other possibilities if we do that. I'd like you to think of a wider vision of what could be, a place for learning, exploration, respite, recreation, and wildlife. Please listen to the people who love that park, and I'm not saying you don't, but please listen to us. And as you are at your retreat, reconsider the city's priorities. Leaving the meadow as it is would be a priceless legacy for us and for our children. Thank you.
Thank you.
Tracy Bonashinsky.
I'm Tracy Bonashinsky. My address is 5863 Northeast 197th Street in Kenmore. I'm here today because I've been listening closely to the Earth, and I'm terrified. This year's Arctic sea ice minimum was tied for the second lowest on record. Sometime during the 21st century, the Arctic could be ice-free in the summer as soon as 2040 if carbon emissions continue to rise unchecked. Even if we curb emissions significantly, more than a third of the world's remaining glaciers will melt before the year 2100. 95% of the oldest and thickest sea ice in the Arctic is already gone. As the ice goes, global warming is accelerated and its effects amplified. Does this seem removed from Kenmore? I can bring it closer to home. This past year was my first as a Cedar River Salmon Journey naturalist. A community visitor who has lived for 40 years on a stretch upriver from the site I was assigned told me that she used to watch the river turn red every fall from her backyard. The Cedar River was so thick with sockeye that they were all she could see from one bank to another. She and I stood at the bend in the river at the end of a dike that had been constructed to protect a gravel pit and gazed in silence at 2 salmon on a nest. They were 2 of 3 fish we could see. Why are salmon runs at historic lows? The causes are complex, but include for certain the degradation and destruction of salmon habitat by humans. So what do salmon have to do with climate? Salmon reverse the normal flow of nutrients in our watershed, bringing them back from the ocean onto land when they return to their natal streams to spawn and die. Trees in salmon forests grow to an impressive size and more than 3 times faster than trees in forests without salmon. Those trees, in turn, capture greenhouse gases and give us life-nourishing oxygen. But the Cedar River runs through Renton, not Kenmore, right? I can bring it closer to home. In 2008, the city of Kenmore proposed to develop a multi-sports field complex at St. Edward's State Park adjacent to a Category 2 wetland. In 2019, the proposed development has been revived with the city's preferred option including AstroTurf, stadium lighting, and a complete replumbing of the wetland basin. The proposed complex would build into 90% of the required wetland buffer, putting it within 10 feet of the wetland. A 10-foot buffer, even a mitigated one, is too small to provide sufficient protective functions for the wetland. Grading and filling the wetland buffer as proposed would destroy its natural functions. We cannot support the optimal health of the wetland without caring for the wetland buffer. What do wetlands have to do with climate? They sequester carbon, primarily in the form of plant matter that gets buried under wet sediment where oxygen can't reach it to start the decomposition process that would release carbon dioxide. I'm terrified, truly terrified by what the Earth is telling us. But I'm also hopeful because of all the things I've talked about happening are happening because of human activities. That means that we can make different choices for different outcomes. Ball fields do not belong in a wetland buffer. We cannot continue to degrade and destroy land that serves important functions for our well-being and survival. This is what the earth, our only home, is telling us. Please be the leader that Kenmore needs as we move into a future that is ever more uncertain. It is within your power as council members to stop this proposal now. We don't need a full EIS, one that will cost tens of thousands of dollars to tell us that this is a bad idea. We already know there should be no development in wetland buffers. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Ms. Banaszewski.
Greg Thompson.
Hi, I'm Greg Thompson, Kenmore. So my son attended outdoor preschool with Camp Roots at the proposed ball field site in St. Ed's. He currently attends monthly wilderness and wellness classes in the same field. We use the field extensively for both these programs. As a family, we visit the park on a regular basis. I've seen the pride in my son's eyes as he shows me all the things he's learned in and around that field. It's really been a huge impact on his life. We count ourselves really, really extremely lucky to have this protected gem as a part of our community, what we call home. While I understand the desire for an upgrade to the community resources, I think a project with so much risk to such a unique place is anything but. This project would change the face of the park, how it's used, and would have lots of unforeseen impacts, as lots of people already talked about tonight. Especially the idea of replacing this natural ground with artificial turf. I just can't imagine justification for that happening in a state park that hosts these programs. St. Edward's is such a specific and unique resource in our community, and I hope we think twice about this irreversible decision and protect that gem that we already have today. Thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Thompson.
Rachel Wiggins.
Hi, my name's Rachel Wiggins. I actually live in Seattle, but I'm a teacher at St. Edward State Park for Camp Roots, Monday through Friday. And I'm here because I can't be a hypocrite to these kids. We walk into that park every day, and it is a sanctuary for us. And as our one of our tenets is stewardship, and not stewardship of that land that we are in. I was out there today. I can tell you what animals walked through that field this morning. The kids that were there today, they can tell you that too. I see deer tracks. I was shocked to see this morning there were tiny deer tracks. That means there's a baby doe that we haven't seen yet. I've seen coyote out there. Last year, we had a full-on bald eagle come down and swoop near one of the children, which was both terrifying and absolutely incredible. These are things that we won't get anywhere else in the park. We get to see wildlife. We do get to experience different parts of the park, and that's wonderful. But I bike from Seattle to St. Edward State Park every day. So I come through Kenmore, and I spend time here, and I love it. But I will never move closer and live in Kenmore if this happens, because this council, you people have the power to change that, and I would never step into a place that could do it differently. And I don't know how to explain to these kids that we're just going to dig up that field and put in turf. I can't. I had one child ask me today, are they gonna kill all of this nature? And that's what's gonna happen. You're not gonna mitigate the land. There isn't gonna suddenly be this magical wetland that's been, saved or somehow preserved when there is artificial turf, when there's lighting. It's just not going to happen. And, I could tell the kids, oh, sure, it's going to be fine. But that would be a lie, and I don't lie to kids. But I just really appreciate the time that you guys have given us, and I hope that you can see the different faces and the different impacts that this ball field would have. It would only be used for part of the year. We use that field every single day. I can tell you about we stopped today with our group of children just to look at one beetle. We stopped what we were doing as a group just to look at one big worm. All of those tiny things, which most adults, we just step right over and ignore, they do not go unnoticed, ever. And these kids are constantly pointing out things to me, and I think I have a great view of what's going on, and they're always finding more than I am. And so I just hope that you guys can think about their future and the legacy that you're leaving them. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Wiggins.
Ian Isbell.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor and City Council. Ian Isbell, I live in Edmonds. And before we discount what the wacko environmentalists are saying, consider this. The state of the world is not self-evident. As a commercial pilot and a flight instructor, I fly over this region all the time. It is gorgeous. It doesn't look like there's anything wrong. Go over the ocean, it's beautiful. You know, the orcas aren't there anymore, but it otherwise doesn't look like there's anything wrong. And the media isn't conveying that to us. That's why it's not self-evident. We have to listen to and read the scientific papers, or I mean, listen to people who do read them. And that's why we don't see how this one little plot of wet mud is important. Because it's just one little spot. But this destruction is happening 1,000-fold in the region and 1,000,000-fold across the planet. We have to move in a different direction. Stewardship, not consumerism. That's the direction we need to move. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Scott Rose.
No, it's at the podium. And there's a button there that you can lower the podium with so that she can speak.
Okay. My name is Scott Rose, Kenmore resident. I'm father of 6, 18 through 4 months old. All of my kids have been part of Camp Roots in one fashion or another. And I would echo what Dakota said, that there's been a lot of words said tonight that I agree with, and very eloquently spoken. I just don't know what I'm going to tell my kids, again, 6 kids that have been a part of Camp Roots, what I'm going to tell them when this field is put in. It just can't be. So I hope that you hear our words tonight and take it in and choose accordingly, please. Thank you.
Kara Whitmire. Oh, I'm sorry. Apologize.
The field has got the most people than anywhere in the park. I have had the most fun than anywhere in the park. I have seen 120 little creatures today. I have seen 1 full-grown salamander. In the field, I have seen 40 deer in the field. I was in the field today. I like to catch tadpoles and draw them and put them back in the water. I love the field, and I love finding 130 worms in the field. It is a cool place. I really like playing in the field. I like the wetlands.
What's your name?
Silas Rose.
How old are you?
8.
Boy, you did a good job.
Thank you.
Okay, go ahead. Give her a round of applause.
Kara Whitmire.
I have to follow that. Hi, my name's Kara Whitmire. I am here unofficially to represent the big kids. We get to hear from a lot of the little ones. I am a cross-country and distance track coach for Inglemoor High School. We also utilize the ball fields at St. Edward's State Park. I actually ran for Inglemoor about, well, we won't mention it, 25 years ago. And we were using the ball fields then when I was practicing there. We organize our practices, have team meetings, we do games, build our community with our track and our cross-country teams in that ball field. We also run our cross-country races through that field. It allows us to add in some extra mileage so that the kids aren't crossing any of the roads, and it makes the North Shore School District happy. We also share the field and the courses with our friends at Bothell High School, Juanita High School. We also share the park with folks from Cedar Park Christian, come and run there as well. If we wanted to have a synthetic field to run through, we've got lots of options for that at Inglemore. There's the football field, that's the track surrounds, it's synthetic. There's the baseball field and the newish soccer field that's all synthetic. They're just about done with the brand new synthetic softball field. So if we wanted to use those kind of terrain for our athletes, then hey, we got plenty of options at Inglemore. So we'd prefer not to have that at the state park as well. It's an opportunity for our kids to get out, get in nature. They get dirty, they have mud running up all their backs. They're sweaty, they're covered in grass. They get a lot of good ankle strength from the varied terrain. So it's another use for the field that maybe you hadn't had an opportunity to consider yet, the impact that it has on. Usually we have between 75 and 105 kids just from Inglemore alone that practice there. Every fall, got maybe 40 track kids that come out, and again, that's just our team. So another consideration for you as you look to see what's to happen at the ball fields there. Thanks for your time tonight.
Thank you, Ms. Whitmire.
Karen McFadden.
That makes me want to run too. I'm Karen McFadden. I live in Kenmore for about 55 years. I'm showing my age. You have all heard my position before. I just want to stress again my opposition to the ball field, developing the ball field at St. Edward. Have ball fields in cooperation with schools where parking, noise, and lights would not be a problem. I feel you dismissed the bat study last summer, which showed bats and many birds use the flyway over the fields nightly. They are only a part, but an important part, of the necessity to preserve their habitat. I don't believe we should destroy the quiet beauty of their homes. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. McFadden.
James, I'm sorry, I can't read your last name. Kay? Okay, yes. Thank you.
Good evening. My name is James Kuman. I'm a Kirkland resident, and so thank you for allowing me to speak to Kenmore City Council on this. As my family and I, we moved here in 2012, and right from the first probably weeks, we've enjoyed St. Ed's Park, going up there and spending time in the playground. And with the arrival of a daughter shortly after we've moved here, we've spent a lot of time in a variety of ways, both on the playground, in the fields, running cross country. My wife and my son, my now 10-year-old son, run on a regular basis. And I have to say, just from personal observation, it seems like that field area is well used and consistently used every time I'm there at the park. Speaking from my personal opinion, it seems to me that ball fields, while maybe complicated or costly or otherwise difficult in other locations, surely there are other locations that would not be insurmountable, but this natural area seems irreplaceable. I also speak, not in an official capacity, but I am a member of the Finn Hill Neighborhood Alliance Board, and I know that St. Ed's features in our board meetings and our relationship with the City of Kirkland on a regular basis as neighbors and friends and wanting to see the good for this entire area. And again, recognizing that these are incremental impacts, but a couple of things that are regularly a part of our discussions for the FHNA are the ERC, and we're big fans of that being established at St. Ed's Park. We're a part of wildlife cameras that are documenting the re-emergence of some, such as bobcats and other fauna in the area. and also the recent approval of the Green Loop funding with the King County Parks Levy recently, $2.5 million to invest in an inner network of trails in this area. And again, recognizing that lights and wetlands are, of course, incremental reductions in wildlife habitat, but still, we as interested friends and neighbors and wishing for the common good would like to see this area preserved as much as possible as we work to preserve green space and open space recreation in the area to your south as well. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Mr.
Liz, sorry?
I was thanking Mr.
Oh, okay. Liz Kimbrough?
Hi, my name is Liz Kimbrough, and I want to start by thanking you for serving our community. I know the needs are many and the opinions varied, so I really appreciate that you're willing to be here and make big decisions for our land and our families. I'm also here to talk about the ballpark at St. Ed's, and I have a little bit of a different perspective. I do have a son at Camp Roots. He struggles to be socially. He still has a lot to learn, and this offers him a space to learn outdoors with kids his age. And also, I just think it's important because it's a different kind of athletic field than is available other places. It offers families the chance to be somewhere that's not groomed. It doesn't have lines. And for my young boys and me, it's nice to be able to just be somewhere and play soccer, but not have to worry about staying within the lines or following specific rules. There are plenty of spaces that are really groomed and organized for sporting events in Kenmore or nearby. But there's nowhere else we can just casually kick a ball around or play dragons or on the same visit, practice with a wiffle ball, and then turn into red light, green light. I would say also in this era of rapid development and harmful consumerism, keeping this one small neighborhood space just the way it is can send two important messages to our children about our values. First, just because you can get something new doesn't always mean you should. And secondly, not everything in life needs to be tidied or fixed. To borrow a phrase from Mr. Rogers, I like you just the way you are, Ballfield. Thanks again for your service, and thanks for listening tonight.
Thank you, Ms. Kimbrough.
Frank and family Liberto? Is that correct? Okay.
If you can use the platform, please, there's a button on the side that you can lower it for the children, on the side.
On this, oh, I see.
On this other side.
Okay, so my name's Frank Liberato, and this is Violetta and Delfina, and the three of us, and my wife Alina are Kirkland residents, and we thank you very much for the opportunity to. Oh, on that side. Oh, that's awesome. Thank you very much. We thank you. For the opportunity to talk today. So, Viola, did you want to say, we're here to talk about the ball field. Would you like to? Okay, there you go. I'm talking to the mic.
The ball field is a home to a lot of different animals and bugs, like worms and beetles and many other things. Also, the creek. It's a nice area to find tadpoles and to do many other things. Also, for things to just live in there. Deer also graze in the field. Birds fly over it. They have nests near it. I've seen a lot of these things. And I think just keeping the ball field is a good move.
So I'll just add very briefly, my wife and I around the dinner table We hear a lot of stories. Both my children attend Camp Roots, and we hear a bunch of stories about this ball field. Things that they saw, and we've seen tadpoles, and we've seen this, and we don't know what half of it is, but the kids know because they ask their teachers, and then they learn this stuff, and it's a really amazing thing. It's really, really much more than just a random flat piece of land that one might be able to fit a ball field onto. So that's one thing. I mean, it's a really great thing that Kenmore has. And then the second bit I would add is just that, you know, St. Edward has is undergoing a lot of changes, good changes, because, you know, the buildings are in disrepair and the things that are going on there are necessary and good, but they're big, and it will probably take a long time before we really understand what impact those will have on the park and the parking and all of those other things. And changes like this, once you make them, are really, really hard to unmake. So I would respectfully request that you take, you know, a certain amount of time to think about that and perhaps delay the project. But either way, my family and my wife and I really do thank you for your kind attention. And also, my kids didn't know there was cake when they made us come to this, so they're serious. So thank you again.
So, what is your name?
Delphina.
And your name?
Violetta.
Vila. You did a really good job. And we really appreciate you coming and talk to us. I'm very, very glad you did. And I know the council feels the same way too. So thank you very much. And I really am impressed with the way you speak. And how old are you?
8.
Wow, that's pretty good. Good for you.
Annalise Stelzer Terminello.
Hi, my name is Annalise Stelzer Terminello, and I didn't know that my son would be here on time, so this is John Prince Terminello, and John Prince goes to, John Prince would like to tell you about some of their experiences with Camp Roots Forest School.
I do piano lesson, and we go on hikes and eat lunch, and at the field we sometimes play games.
So I've heard a lot of very intelligent people come and speak with you today. And they've said some really amazing things, some of which kind of made me teary-eyed because they were so touching. And all I'd really like to add to that is that I think that the St. Edward's State Park is a very unique place in the Seattle area, and I'm a little disappointed that it's being commercialized upcoming, but I would be heartbroken if the wetland was replaced with a ball field that had artificial turf on it. I think it would be very irresponsible, and I think that it's really important to recognize that I haven't heard, hold on a second. I haven't heard anybody come up here and say tonight, let's do the ball field project. That's a great idea. I haven't heard one person say that tonight. I haven't heard one person say that it's financially responsible, or that they think it's a super great idea, or that there's nowhere else to put a ball field. I'm sure there's lots of great places. And it's just very unique to have that kind of open space in a city like this that's growing so rapidly. We're losing so much open space, and it's kind of stinks. And I would just encourage every one of you who are, designated to make this final decision to go to that space, that open field, and just be there and just take some quiet time there and listen and observe and just listen to, what your heart tells you about what you should do about this ball field, because it's just a very special place, and it would be heartbreaking for it to be torn down. And all of the things. So, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Renault.
Aaron Cole?
Hi, I'm Erin Cole, and I'm a Bothell resident. I just moved there last March from Finn Hill, so I used to be quite close to the park. And I am a teacher at Camp Roots, and I'm a new teacher, so I'm very nervous, but I am up here to introduce myself. I wanted to kind of go through all the classes that we have at the park. We've got Little Roots, 1 to 3-year-olds, Sprouting Roots, 3 to 4-year-olds, Kinder Roots, 5-year-olds, Wild Roots, 11 to 15, Forest Roots, 6 to 12, and Family Roots, all ages. And I teach the 1 and 2-year-olds. So I literally take 1 and 2-year-olds out in the middle of this field. Some of these kids are barely walking, and they're going on hikes with us. In fact, we have one child who is front-packed and has just learned how to stand. And we start our class every day at the field. We have 6 hikes we go on, and all 5 of them cannot be accessed without crossing the field. And because our kids are so tiny, that's half our hike right there, right in that field. And it is hard to move them from point A to point B, so they know quite a bit about this field. And I would really encourage you, I really liked what the last speaker said, to go to the field and really look at it. You see a lot, especially if you're with a 1-year-old who's real close to the ground. So if you can take a real small kid with you and try to see what they see, and when I say that, I mean really get down to the ground. One of the things that I do with our 1 and 2-year-olds is we lay on our stomachs in that wet field. We have really good gear. And we see what there is, and it is a literal jungle if you're really looking. And I just encourage you to really go look if you haven't had a chance to go look. Another great time to go is to go at dusk. I mean, it is a party out there with animals at dusk. And you might not feel that way when you're walking around the park during the day. Really, there's all this stuff out here. There really, truly is. And again, I encourage you to go with a child because they will show it to you. So one of the things we do when we are out on our hikes, we have a literacy component. I always read them a book about halfway through a hike. Let them rest, get a little snack, read a little together. The last book I read them was called Treasure, and it was about 2 little girls who were out in the forest looking for treasure. Treasures are something we find all the time as kids, the little acorns, little leaves, special rock. And the little girls in this book were looking for treasure, and they were also finding little things, but it just wasn't quite right. It wasn't the treasure for them. And they finally came upon a waterfall, and they decided that that was their treasure. And not all treasures can be put in your pocket. And then when we were done having that book, we talked as one talks to one.
Ms. Cole, we're at 3 minutes.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very
Christy
much for your
D'Amico?
comments.
Is there a Christy? Oh, okay.
Hi. I'm Christy D'Amico, and I live in Kirkland, and I didn't know I was talking, but I'll just give it a quick go. I've been interested in conserving at St. Ed's for a long time now. It's been probably coming up on 10 years, maybe more. I was really disappointed about the seminary being commercialized, but I'm okay with it because I really never wanted the building to be torn down. I know that was an option at one point, and I didn't like it. But I'm really concerned about the turf field possibility at the ball fields because this turf stuff is apparently carcinogenic from what I've read about. There's a coach at UW a soccer coach that found that some of her kids that were goalies were getting cancer, and it was because of the turf. So turf is not healthy for humans or other living things, including athletes. Second of all, I just want to reiterate, so many people use that field that aren't, there's an idea that, it doesn't get used. Well, Camp Roots uses it, Wilderness Awareness School uses it, just the general populace uses it, and This is a state park we're talking about, and I don't understand how a state park can be taken over by a city and turned into something that a small subset of the city wants. Okay, so that doesn't make any sense to me in a moral kind of way. It's not serving the most people that it can. The way it is now, it serves a lot of people. I guess that's all I had to say. I didn't know I was talking. Hi.
Mike D.
Howdy, Mike D. here. I was asked to participate today. Sometimes when I come over to Kenmore, people ask me to play along on some of the things you're all working on. Thank you for the service for the outgoing council members, and hi to the council member-elect in the audience here watching the session today, and congratulations to those reelected. I'm Mike D. from Lake Forest Park, and I hadn't planned to make a public comment today, but when the Sound Transit people came up here, they concerned me with that parking garage stuff. And I'm going to jump around here. Real quick before I forget, I also want to thank you for the long public comment opportunity that you're giving the citizens to do. Some cities don't quite do that. They're like, oh, you got half an hour or whatever, only so many people can comment. I appreciate that you make sure that everybody gets a chance to speak if they sign up, and maybe even if they don't sign up, who knows. But back to the Sound Transit 3, I was concerned. I heard it seemed to bring up a lot more questions than it did answers to me. When I look at the ballot measure, and I've looked at it a bunch of times because over in Lake Forest Park, we're considering, do we actually want a parking garage there at the town center? And so, could we give it to somebody else? Does Kenmore want our parking garage? So who knows? So I'm looking for more helpful answers when it comes to parking garage number 2 of 3. We're looking for one in Bothell, as you know, and one here in Kenmore, and one in Lake Forest Park is the plan, along 522. But how's that going to work out? I agree with the Sound Transit presenter that said that the information and the numbers and all that stuff was they didn't quite say it that way, but we were getting all these different numbers, and it would help to have that kind of written out and slides and stuff like that. We actually have that in Lake Forest Park. We get to see how big the parking garage is going to be and how far past City Hall it goes and how much it takes up to the town center. But anyway, back to Kenmore. I do expect 300 additional spots and to replace whatever you already have here. So I'm not sure if they have that all figured out, and hopefully they do. It was also interesting to see that you get to add a bunch more stops. You have 2 stops already, it looks like, and you might get to add 2. So far, for the $54 billion in Lake Forest Park, they took away the 2 that were at the town center. The 522 doesn't stop there anymore, so that's kind of inconvenient. Let's see. There was an article in the Shoreline Area News that talked about all these changes that were coming from Sound Transit 3, and we might even not get our parking garage over there in Lake Forest Park, so I'm not sure, but I'll have to look at that closer. But if you had some traffic studies from maybe if you made your parking garage bigger and we didn't need one in Lake Forest Park, the citizens of Lake Forest Park might consider that. All right, I'll move on. I want to thank you for your mobile house zoning changes you did in the past to protect the citizens. The St. Edward's State Park, I don't think I've actually been to it. It sounds like a great place. Not sure about the synthetic field thing, but I do understand that you're probably it sounds like you're the host and the stewards of it.
Mr. D, we're at 3 minutes.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Thank you.
Okay. And thank you for your time. I'm out of time. Thanks.
Noah Orr. Noah Orr.
Council members, thank you for your service to our community. My name is Noah Orr, and I live on Finn Hill, just across the street from St. Edward State Park. Today I enjoyed a jog through the park, as I've done on many other occasions. And as I passed by the ball field area, I was greeted by the familiar sound of Camp Roots children laughing and playing. Both of my kids, including my oldest daughter, Nai here, went through Camp Roots. And they've also been involved in baseball and softball with North Lake Little League for the past few years. I'm also serving as a head coach for both of their teams this coming spring, and I fully understand the challenges that the league is experiencing right now with the current shortage of quality fields to play on, especially in Kenmore. I'm not opposed to the general idea of increasing the number of available quality ball fields in our area. And living so close to the state park, it would be very convenient to have another quality ball field nearby, and it would limit the amount of time we spend in the car traveling to and from other fields nearby. However, this is an inappropriate place for a ball field to exist in the first place. I am here today to implore you to vote to maintain the existing ball field area as a passive open space. This council has received numerous accounts and documentation showing that this is not vacant, wasted land which is serving no purpose. It is serving a fine purpose today, as evidenced by the many families and the animals that benefit from it on a daily basis, not to mention the many harder to quantify environmental benefits that the field and particularly the surrounding wetland area gives us. I am strongly opposed to any current or future development plans to create an artificial turf field over the existing ball field. The proposed field would egregiously encroach into an environmentally sensitive wetland area, and the field should remain as is. It would be irresponsible of the city to pursue an artificial turf field in the proposed location or anywhere in the state park for that matter. I'd much prefer to see the city develop a better partnership with the North Shore School District, similar to how the city of Kirkland has with the Lake Washington School District. We do have enough schools to serve the children of our community, and partnering with NSD to update the existing grass fields at those schools for use by North Lake Little League and other organizations is a much more sensible approach to meeting this growing need. I strongly urge this council to vote no on any development plans for an artificial turf field at St. Edward State Park. Your efforts to responsibly meet the need of additional quality recreational fields while preserving our natural, open and wild spaces such as St. Edward State Park is much appreciated. Thank you for your time and consideration.
Thank you, Mr.
Terminello.
Hello, thank you for your time again today. I've just recently...
Your name, please?
Terminello, yes.
That's your full name?
Yes.
Terminello?
Yes. I've been participating with Bastyr University for many years now as a nonprofit organization. We do art in the park and meals for kids during the summertime, amongst a lot of other activities. I was really shocked to hear that this plan was in development and that it's gone this far. I see that the park is a very beautiful place, but the idea that it's going to be developed to put a fake turf field was really surprising to me, especially the fact that it's in the state park. I'm not used to hearing state parks being used this way. When I think of a state park, I think they're specially designed to preserve the wildlife and the nature that's used to be abundant everywhere in this area. And now that we have trees and box stores and traffic, the state parks were supposed to be a way to preserve an older way of life. So I was really shocked to hear that this idea has really went this far. One of my biggest concerns is that the playfield area now is leveled. It has natural grass, but it's designed for drainage purposes. So any trash that you guys are going to incorporate in this area is going to go into the natural forest and run off to Lake Washington. With my experience in working with parks, a lot of these turfs are replaced every 5 or 6 years because they do have a lot of microplastic that breaks down and makes the field unusable. So that was really shocking to me to have that in a area that is supposed to be pristine and clean. And I can imagine animals, interacting with this stuff, and we'll have more unnecessary microplastic in Lake Washington. Another concern is that from what I see from the park now, there's a big overflow area for parking that is on natural grass also. So there will be a lot more automobiles parked in this area, which I'm surprised that would be something that the city and the state would want. And one quick note, since I'm running out of time, is that when I dropped off some of our work study students that were working with us, I was in the parking lot at Bastier and I saw a reindeer cross my path the other day. And I have a video of it, a large male deer. And I just didn't know there was large mammals in this park, and I was really surprised to see that. So please keep the state park for what's intended. And one thing else I was surprised about, that this plan was brought up before and already shot down.
We're at 3
So
minutes. Thank you.
Really surprised it's coming up again.
Thank you. Mayor, there's nobody else signed up.
Very much, Terminal. Anybody else wishing to be heard? Thank you all for your comments tonight. And we certainly will be looking at this with the pros plan. Next item on the agenda is the consent agenda. Is there a motion to approve?
So moved.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Any comments?
First and second, I apologize.
I'm sorry?
Was that Councilmember Denuski is the first?
No.
I was the second this time.
Okay, first was, thank you.
Councilman Curtis, I know you had a question. Are you happy? I'm happy. All right, if there's no discussion, all those in favor of approving the consent agenda, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Consent agenda stands approved as written. Next item on the agenda is a public hearing to allow construction and trade as a temporary use for interim public works shop for a one-year period for a property located at 6532 Northeast Bothell Way, which is owned by the city of Kenmore and zoned downtown commercial. Mr. Hampson.
Good evening. Council, is this on?
Not yet. Nope. You need to push a button.
I pushed it twice. What the heck?
Well, that's the thing. You need to push it once.
Well, anyway, good evening, council, and thank you for the opportunity to bring this forward to your for your consideration. As you mentioned, this is a public hearing to have public comment on the allowed use of the public workshop at the vacant property on 67th and 522. Currently, the city is using that property as a temporary public works shop, outdoor shop, and we're in the process of trying to find a new home for our public works shop. And so we have been using this site for 1 year now, and it is coming up on expiration of that annual year. And so we need to come back to you for approval to use the site again for another, maybe another year. I'm not sure exactly how long it will be needed. But the purpose of this public hearing is that if we have a temporary use permit that is in excess of 90 days, it's not an administrative process, it's an actual council decision followed by a public hearing. And so that's what the purpose of this is tonight. And so after the public hearing, we'll have an opportunity to have action on the motion.
Any questions? All right, hearing none. I'll declare the hearing on, to allow the construction and trade as a temporary use for interim public workshop for a one-year period on, for property located at 6532 Northeast Bothell Way, which is owned by the city of Kenmore and zoned downtown commercial. Clerk, please call the first person.
Is it Al M? Is there an Al M here? Melson? Oh, it looked like an M. I apologize. That was the only person signed up.
Oh, signed up on the wrong list.
Possibly.
All right. Anybody wishing to be heard? Then I will, one more time, anybody wishing to be heard on the, to allow construction and trade as temporary use for interim public works shop for a one-year period for property located at 6532 Northeast Bothell Way, which is owned by the city of Kenmore and zoned downtown commercial. Hearing nobody and seeing nobody coming forward, I declare the public hearing closed. Next item on the agenda is an action to allow the construction and trade as a temporary use for interim public works shop for a one-year period for a property located at 6532 Northeast Bothell Way, which is owned by the city of Kenmore and zoned downtown commercial.
So this is the part where we would need council action in order to consider the extension of the temporary use permit. If you have any questions, I'm available for questions. If not,
Is there any questions? Councilmember Marshall?
Were there any more, I think there was a break-in last time that you reported at some point. Was there any more of that, you know?
not that I'm aware of. That was the only break-in that happened, and another thing that you typically ask when we bring these back or forward to you has there been any complaints? And so we haven't received any complaints that we're aware of from the city using the site as a temporary public workshop.
So if there's no other questions or comments, Chair will entertain a motion to allow construction and trade as a temporary use for interim public workshop for a one-year period at real property located at 6532 Northeast Bothell Way, Kenmore, Washington, which is owned by the city of Kenmore and zoned downtown commercial, subject to conditions.
So moved.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Is there any further discussion? Hearing none, clerk, please take the roll.
Councilmember Curtis?
Yes.
Councilmember Marshall?
Yes.
Councilmember Shrubnik?
Yes.
Mayor Baker?
Yes.
Councilmember Denuski?
Yes.
Deputy Mayor Herbig?
Yes.
Councilmember Smith?
Yes.
All right, that passes unanimously. Next item on the agenda, a regional coalition for housing, ARCH, 2020 Administrative and Budget and Work Program. Ms. Owsley. And Lindsay Masters, the ARCH Executive Director.
Good evening,
Ms.
council members.
Ms. Masters, I knew Arthur quite well, and it's nice to finally meet you.
As you know, affordable housing is one of the council's top 5 goals for this year. And as a member jurisdiction of a regional coalition for housing, each year the city is required to act on and approve the annual work program and budget for the organization. Since we are late in the hour, I'm going to turn the mic over to Executive Director Lindsay Masters, who has a presentation and will be available for questions. Thank you.
Great, thank you. So this is our agenda for the presentation tonight. One, this is an opportunity for us to remind you who ARCH is, what we do, how we work with your city, talk about some of our program areas and accomplishments in the last year, give you a high-level snapshot of the community impact we have across the region, and then some specific impact that we've been able to accomplish in Kenmore, and then talk a little bit about specifically the home ownership program assessment we did in the last year, and how that work informed the development of our 2020 work program and budget. So as a reminder, ARCH is an interlocal agency formed by cities entering into interlocal agreement together, purpose of which is to jointly and collaboratively work on promoting affordable housing across East King County. We've got 15 member cities in King County that comprise our membership. Yep. And if you are a visual thinker, you appreciate the map we have here. This represents the areas in which we work. Our governance is a key part of what's covered in the interlocal agreement. So we're governed by an executive board comprised of executive level staff from our member cities. And we've been thrilled to have Nancy as a consistent representative on the board for some time. The role of that body is both to provide day-to-day oversight over ARCH's work, to make recommendations to you every year on our work program and budget, as well as other policy and planning issues and funding recommendations. The board also appoints our administering agency, which is the City of Bellevue, and Bellevue provides a unique function within ARCH, providing a lot of our administrative services. We also depend on a citizen advisory board. That's part of Arch's DNA since its inception, in order to provide community-based recommendations on funding, and that's a process we facilitate every year. Your role as member city councils is also extremely important. Not only do you approve our work program and budget every year, you also approve any specific funding allocations of local resources that get pooled through what's called the Arch Housing Trust Fund. Then there are also Arch staff that play a critical role. We are really a supplement to your city staff. We work closely with planning departments, development services staff, et cetera, and really are an extension of you. So I'll go over some of our key program areas. First program area is investment in affordable housing. So as mentioned, Arch's model for many years has been to pool local funds into a regional trust fund to advance projects through that process in coordination with all the other public and private funders in affordable housing statewide. We also look for strategic opportunities to use surplus public property and are excited to work on some of those opportunities in Kenmore. In 2019, some of our accomplishments were where there were 2 new projects that opened, which I'll show you in a minute, and then another project that has a groundbreaking this week, actually. We released funding guidelines for this year's annual funding round of approximately $6 million, and recommendations for those are going to be going to the our board this week and then come back to you in the early part of 2020. This was a unique year in the level of requests that we've seen. 9 projects requesting about $19 million, so way in excess of the resources we have. It's a difficult process, but I think we're going to fund some excellent projects out of that. And then, as in Kenmore, we were participants in coordination on many transit-oriented development project opportunities. So a couple of those projects I mentioned that opened this year. One was the 30 Bellevue Project, a partnership between Imagine Housing and St. Luke's Lutheran Church. We'll provide 63 affordable homes for families and individuals, including several coming out of homelessness. The other project that opened this year was the Sammamish Cottages, developed by Habitat for Humanity, and they partnered with the city of Sammamish, who donated the property. They have an incredibly interesting model and compelling model where they develop the homes in partnership with the families that are going to live in the homes. And there were thousands of hours of sweat equity put into the construction of these homes. And so it was a really meaningful process when they opened and families were finally able to move in. We also had a groundbreaking this year for the Women and Family Shelter in Kirkland that will be run by the Sophia Way and Catholic Community Services, and will be the first 24/7 shelter on the east side for women and families. And that was another partnership between a faith-based community and service providers. Our next program area, housing policy and planning. So this is an area in which we really work with cities to help facilitate the policies and initiatives that they want to work on in that particular year. And a lot of that activity centers around the development of incentive programs, both land use and other types of incentives, supporting the development of local housing plans, housing elements of comp plans, and then participation in kind of more regional planning efforts. 2019, some of our highlights were the adoption of the MFTE program. Excited to see that get put in place in Kenmore as well as in Woodinville, and are looking forward to seeing projects come under through that program. We were also really impressed with the participation we had in development of manufactured housing community preservation in Kenmore. It was a big highlight from this year. And then we worked on the development of shared legislative priorities across Arch cities, and that's still kind of in its nascent stages of what that might look like in the future. We did discuss and forward some recommendations around House Bill 1406. We're excited to see that move forward here. And we also are helping to staff the new GMPC Affordable Housing Committee and participating with some other city staff in that. This is our third program area, Housing Program Administration and Stewardship. This received a lot of attention and focus this year by both the board and staff. And we really did a comprehensive process to look at the administration of our home ownership program and try to identify the successes and some of the gaps in that program. We've developed some new reporting measures so that we are providing more clear and consistent and measurable information on the monitoring activities we do to the board. And then in midway through the year, the board did authorize some additional interim funding excuse me, for compliance staffing. Just getting over a cold. And I will touch a little bit more on that in a moment. One of the other things we're doing that's new in this area is we're starting to collect more demographic information on all the beneficiaries of the housing program. So I'm excited to bring that information back in the next year. Our final program area is kind of direct engagement and involvement with the community. And highlights from this year included a collaboration with Eastside Interfaith Social Concerns Council on a workshop for faith communities, affordable housing providers, and cities looking to collaborate around affordable housing opportunities on faith-based property. In addition, we are also on a daily basis interacting with people who are looking for housing, trying to provide them assistance to locate opportunities as they come available. It's a challenging part of our work because there's obviously not enough housing to go around. So switching to kind of high-level regional impact, this is a map of all of the Housing Trust Fund investments that have been made by ARCH over the last 2.5 decades, resulting in about 3,600 units or beds, and the local investment represented by those. And then this is a graph showing the production annually through all of the combined incentive and inclusionary zoning programs across ARCH cities. And obviously the number has gone up in recent years, both due to the level of development activity going on, but also due to more and more cities adding new incentives and programs. And now we've got 7 cities that all have mandatory approaches. One city that has taken the step to apply the program to commercial development, which is, I think, an untapped opportunity. Some cities utilizing that program to generate revenue that they invest in housing. And then multifamily tax exemption obviously becoming more prevalent as well. This is kind of the city-by-city breakdown of the production we've seen through those programs and the affordability levels that are being met. So not the deepest levels of affordability that we achieve through the Housing Trust Fund, but a range from as low as 50% of median income all the way up to 120% of median income. And we expect production to continue at a steady pace here, and that is one of the reasons why we spend a lot of time focused on our capacity to monitor all these units. Just to focus on Kenmore, some of the projects and future opportunities here. So we are on an ongoing basis monitoring and stewarding both rental and homeownership units at 3 different projects. I think the combined total of those is 136 or 139 units, affordable at a range of levels. Hoping to see another couple projects come to fruition soon, potentially through the zoning programs you put in place and the incentive programs, certainly through the opportunity to promote transit-oriented development around the BRT, as was discussed earlier tonight, and looking forward to taking advantage of opportunities to grow the investment through HB 1406 revenues. So
talk a little bit about the homeownership program assessment we did this year. I think I touched on this the last time I was here, and we were just beginning this effort. But over the course of the year, the board commissioned and had completed a consultant assessment to do a comprehensive evaluation of the program and do that in concert with an audit of all of the homes within the program to look at occupancy and other compliance issues. And that report, I think, is a summary that is attached to your information if you want to look at all the details to that. But the high-level findings were generally that the program is doing a good job of serving the targeted income households and providing really meaningful opportunities for wealth building for families in that program. We have not done a good job of making sure our staffing has grown commensurate with the growth of the program. So I think there were somewhere around 100 units in the early 2000s, and we today have 7 times that number with the same level of staffing. So that it's gotten really out of proportion. And that obviously has pointed to a need for us to be more actively involved in the monitoring and being able to follow up when there are compliance issues, even though they do overall represent a small percentage of the program. This is just a visualization of what that has looked like. The lines represent the growth in the units that we are overseeing in those 2 categories, incentive programs and trust fund investment. And the green bar below is the growth in our administrative budget. So staffing has pretty much maintained a consistent level in that time while the portfolio has grown significantly. So obviously, the recommendations, first and foremost, was to expand our staffing, and we've taken action on that. Obviously, want to strengthen our enforcement and look at some of our legal tools and some of the tools both in our existing covenant and things that we might add to that over time. Improve our systems. So we had been using kind of a manual system for doing a lot of the administrative work, and we are moving forward with switching to a very sophisticated software that's used by many other homeownership programs. So all that work was helpful in informing the development of our 2020 work program and budget. This provides you a snapshot of essentially what's different in the budget this year compared to past years that's been fairly consistent from year to year. So on the budget side, we have added 2 new positions that are focused on compliance monitoring and program administration. One of those is actually going to focus on rental compliance because that portfolio has also grown substantially, and one's focused on home ownership. And I'm excited that both of those people have now finally started as of last week. We have also added a couple of temporary interns, and that's positions that we'd like to keep in our budget to just maintain that support to our administration throughout the year, and also kind of grow the capacity in the field for people who are interested in joining affordable housing. We added some costs around that software licensing that I mentioned, and we added a small consultant budget to help build out that database. As far as the work program, we did add some other significant substantive items that are kind of ambitious, maybe optimistic for us to accomplish this year, but we thought were important to set forth as goals. One, just foundationally, we want to provide excellent stewardship of the affordable housing assets, and the addition of that staff are really critical for us to accomplish that. 2, we want to commit to be developing specific and measurable goals for production and preservation of housing across the ARCH member communities. ARCH has not had specific numerical goals up till now, and I think we're at a point where it's going to be important for us to organize our efforts to have those goals. We also want to develop a plan specific to the east side around transit-oriented development, and expect to be doing that with specific site opportunities, but would also like to kind of step back and talk about how do we work successfully with all the various partners that it takes to get these projects done. And then finally, and I'm covering the items that are stars, those were the ones elevated as priorities by the board. Finally, the board had also discussed continuing that evaluation of ARCH's capacity. So we spent a lot of time talking about monitoring capacity this year, and I think we want to take another holistic look at all those other functions and program areas that ARCH provides to member cities, as the demand for much of what we do has gone up. Snapshot of just what those budget numbers look like from last year compared to this year. So there's about a $15,000 increase for Kenmore to cover that additional staff, and that is allocated equitably across the members on a per capita basis. And then as a additional attachment to our work program, there are individual city specified work program activities that are identified by the staff that they would like to receive support from ARCH staff to work on. So we've got a number of those listed in here. And
Wait a minute, I'll just fill in the top bullet, identifying a higher priority item. That would be like the missing middle that was the topic of discussion here a few weeks ago. And then also opportunities on public-owned land or tax-exempt property.
And that was it. So I welcome any questions.
Councilmember Curtis.
So I understand the actual motion that's being requested is to approve the ARCH budget, but since that has a $15,000 implication for Kenmore, does approving one automatically approve the other, or we need to come up with the extra $15,000 as well?
We have sufficient budget to cover that extra money.
All right, thank you.
Any other questions? The chair will then entertain a motion to approve the ARCH 2020 administrative budget and work plan.
So moved. So moved.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Any further comments, questions? Councilmember Curtis.
I'll just comment. I think ARCH does a fantastic job. If we had to do all this work by ourselves, shoot, we wouldn't be near as effective. So thank you.
Yeah, I agree, except I'd like to see more housing available at the 35% level. If there's no further questions, clerk, please take the roll.
Councilmember Shubnik?
Yes.
Mayor Baker?
Yes.
Councilmember Smith?
Yes.
Deputy Mayor Herbig?
Yes.
Councilmember Marshall?
Yes.
Councilmember Curtis?
Yes.
Councilmember Denuski?
Yes.
Motion passes unanimously.
Thank you, council, and thanks to Lindsay. This has been an important year for the organization, and your leadership has been really wonderful. Thanks.
Yeah, you guys have gone through a lot of changes, and you've done a really good job, so thank you very much.
Thank you.
All right, next item on the agenda, ordinance number 19-0503, which disables the stormwater conservation loan program and stormwater sideline repair program. Mr. Sawyer. See, you've lost Gordon.
Good evening, Mayor, Council. And I'd also like to extend my thanks to Councilmember Smith, Councilmember Denuski. It's been a pleasure being able to present to you. I feel honored to be one of your last presentations. I'm glad it's surface water. Going out on a high note, so buckle down for the next few hours. It's going to be.
No.
I'm just joking. Actually, I'm here tonight, and I will try and remember to speak quietly. I have been told that my voice carries in these microphones.
Oh, that's okay. Wake us up.
So I'm here tonight to have council consider adoption of ordinance 190503, which establishes, through an amendment of Chapter 1340 of the KMC, two programs, the Stormwater Conservation Loan Program and the Stormwater Sideline Repair Program. So I just have a brief presentation which will provide some background leading up to the ordinance and cover the key points of both programs, and then I'll try and provide some context with a few examples. So going back to the last Surface Water Master Plan update, myself and staff discussed several policies regarding private property drainage, surface water management issues, in order to establish some policy that would help staff provide consistent response for private property drainage issues to residents in the city. The policies that were established reiterated that, primarily private property drainage issues are the responsibility of the private property owner to manage. However, the city wanted to maintain some discretion in order to address certain stormwater issues that might come up if they were posing certain hazards to public safety and welfare. And so we went through those policies and codified that in 2016 with some KMC updates, primarily again to Chapter 1340, which discusses surface water policy, and codified those policies. Following that update, staff then kind of went deeper into the data, because up to this point we knew that this was an issue. Staff were responding to these complaints quite frequently, and we wanted to kind of get a better handle on to quantify the issue that we were dealing with. So my team did quite a bit of GIS analysis and property research, so we were looking at our drainage maps and finding all the instances where you may have right-of-way drainage going from a street or some sort of publicly owned property through private property, and then to a receiving water body, or maybe the next street down, or into a wetland, for example. And so we were able to pull up several of the properties through that first step, and then we spent quite a bit of time researching assessors maps, plat maps, going through recorded documents, several trips down to King County Archives to actually make sure that we were, overturning every stone and seeing what kind of easements or any sort of recorded document that might establish ownership of these drainage lines through these properties. And I outline it in my report, but very briefly, we ended up finding over 700 properties just in the city of Kenmore where we had this issue happening, and about 200 through our research we were able to determine had some kind of easement or recorded document that established some responsibility for that drainage facility. Various others were part of private facilities that we already knew of and inspected, some with easements, some that we need to maybe pursue and clarify additional easement language. But there were still well over 400 remaining properties that basically are not inspected. We don't necessarily have much information on these facilities, but they are out there. So this, it's kind of those properties where we want to be prepared and have these tools available when issues come up, that this ordinance with these two programs that we are proposing would help the city, or provide some tools for the city to help respond to issues that come up on all these properties. So the first program I will go through is we're proposing a stormwater sideline repair program, is what we're calling it. And this program, the eligibility which I've got in front of you, coincides with the policies that we developed back in 2015 and codified in 2016. These are single-family residential properties. The issues, and again, I should step a little bit here. So this would be if the circumstances deemed that the city would want to step in. These would be the type of criteria that would need to be present for it to be eligible for this program and, you know, for the city to step in. So once that's been determined, then we would go through these eligibility criteria. So located on residential property, doesn't contain waters of the state, such as streams or wetlands. It's not a groundwater issue. The facility isn't there primarily to manage private runoff. There would need to be a direct measurable benefit, such as reduced flooding, downstream erosion, water quality to city facilities. And on this program, so this would be a grant type program without any cost incurred by the property owner, and the work would be conducted by the city or our contractors. And if this work were to happen, the property owner would have to record documentation that acknowledges you know, future repair, maintenance, operation of the facility. It is on private property, and it is the sole responsibility of the private property owner moving forward. And I'm going to dive into the second option here, but I just want to emphasize that one of the key differences between this grant program, the next program that I'm going to discuss, is that this program, there has to be that direct measurable benefit to city public facilities. So this, because in order for the city to expend any funds or do anything on this property, you know, to avoid any issues of gifting of public funds, this is where we're resolving an issue that is directly impacting publicly owned facilities. And so there is a direct and measurable benefit to that public facility. The second program that the ordinance would establish is the Surface Water Loan Program. So again, this would be eligibility would require that this be a single-family residential property. The facilities would have to be maintained and operated to regular city standards, so the same standards that we would apply to ourselves in the right-of-way. And the eligibility here would be a little bit more lenient because this is a loan type program. So this would be the property owner is getting a loan from the city that they are repaying with interest, and then they are having their own contractor conduct this work using those funds. So there's less issue of gift of public funds. However, they would still have to meet certain criteria determined by the city manager, such as measurable benefits that I discussed in the other program, and the other policies outlined in Kenmore Municipal Code. So again, just to emphasize kind of the difference between this one versus the grant program, this is a loan that is repaid to the city with interest, and the work would be, using those funds would be conducted by the property owner, versus the grant type program, which would be no cost incurred by the property owner, and the city would conduct that work or its contractors. And but there has to be it's much more stringent eligibility requirements for that program. So rather than just keep talking, I think it's a picture is a lot easier to describe kind of how these programs might be implemented. So I've created a few illustrations, but I think through the caution of our city attorney, I just want to make sure that, you know, these are just illustrations for examples. So we're not saying that, you know, this is what we would decide if this were the situation. There are many situations that might look very similar, you know, at a high level, but then when you get into all the specific details, you know, it might be very different, you know, very different issues going on that would give you a completely different answer on whether or not they might be eligible for this program, or even eligible for anything at all. So just wanted to make sure I point that out and to keep in mind. So this first illustration here, going back to when I described all those properties that we researched here, this is what I was talking about. So we have what I'm representing, some city streets here or right-of-way going around a block of residential homes. And to the left, I've just indicated a natural area, so that could be receiving water body, the lake, wetlands. And what's very common with the topography in Kenmore is that surface water is just going to follow the gravity, and it's going to go along the topography of the surface, and from the higher ground to wherever the receiving water body is. So we get a lot of examples where it needs to cut through properties between one right-of-way, and what I'm showing here is maybe another street that's lower block down. And this type of situation, you know, there's many real examples that we deal with, but a facility located on private property, something is happening and it is resulting in some kind of issue impacting both private property and city right-of-way in this example. So, you know, without knowing all the details, this could be one that qualifies for really either program. They check many of the boxes that could make them eligible for the grant program. Again, and if you qualify for the grant program, you probably check many of the boxes that would make you eligible for the loan program. Or maybe the circumstances of this case would be code enforcement might be a more appropriate way to go, but the end result would be to protect that the public facilities and the public safety, and these would just be kind of more tools that we would have in order to effectively do that. Sure.
Particular one. So in this example, is the problem at the catch basin there right below the exclamation mark? Is that where the problem is?
No, the problem, I'm trying to indicate the problem is like the exclamation point.
Okay, so it's on the private property, it's
Correct.
not in the city.
If it were happening, for instance, at the catch basin, it would be within our jurisdiction to be able to get in there and take care of it.
Okay, that's what I was trying, I just wanted to understand.
So this might be, you know, maybe the pipe has collapsed on private property, or, you know, a multitude of reasons.
Thank you.
But yes, it's just to indicate a issue occurring on the private side of the property line. So very similar, but also different is the same situation, but this is a completely private system. So this is collecting surface and stormwater on private property, and then something is happening where it's resulting in the same outcome. So the outcome is that we're having that same issue occur to the public facilities and posing an issue to public safety, but the source is completely privately contained. So this would be one where, again, there could always be different circumstances, but we would go through this, and it's probably less likely that they would score well on the public benefit here, because it's just a private system without those other components. But, you know, there could be factors going on that score well in other areas, but you know, anything that can happen out there, I think we've probably seen just about everything, and we continue to find new situations that come up. So just to illustrate that nothing is really black and white out there. Yet another example where we have an issue that's happening on private property, and there is not really an impact to the public facilities at all here. So again, as we look through the criteria in our policy, they would probably score less so on the impacts to public infrastructure, but they could still be having impacts to a receiving water body, the neighboring properties. So, you know, this might be something where the loan option might score really well, and that could be a tool that these people could have to address this issue. And again, it's kind of getting repetitive, but, you know, here's another one where you've got completely private contained, so there's no source leaving or coming from the right-of-way, and So again, for a grant program, when we go through our eligibility scoring, this would probably score very low, but potentially, depending on the circumstances, the loan tool might be something that we could consider. Any questions on those? Those are the four kind of generic examples I wanted to provide.
Councilmember Marshall.
Would those include natural springs, or would you be regulating, or would some of these issues be dealing with natural springs, or would they be considered water of the state?
So by natural springs, I presume like groundwater? Yeah. So in the policies we developed in 2015-16, we actually, issues arising primarily from groundwater are not considered to be, will not be considered for any sort of maintenance or operation by the city. I think they're just, the complexities involved with that are just not as straightforward. When you've got some sort of conveyance just going from point A to point B, it's much easier to deal with it.
Councilmember Shredwick, did you have a question?
Yeah. I really appreciate your work on this. It's very thoughtful, very detailed. And I really like the grant program. It's very clear. The criteria are clear, rationale. Less so for the loan program, and that's where my concern is. It seems like the criteria isn't as clear. I'm not seeing like a limit to what that would be. And while there's no outright gift of public funds, I mean, there will be administrative costs for running this program. So there are city costs. So I guess I'm just not sure if there isn't, I'm not sure why we would be doing it minus the clear public benefit. And if there's the clear public benefit, then it would be on the grant side. So I'm just, I guess I'm struggling a little bit with that, but I'll defer to my other council folks.
Other questions?
Don has a.
If I may, I just have a comment. In that, in the loan program, in the ordinance, I believe page 184 at the top of the page, part of the loan application would require an application fee, which would be adopted by the council by resolution, which would attempt to cover those administrative costs.
And I can, regarding the criteria and the loan program, I think it's somewhat intentionally left a little bit more vague because I think the intent would be to provide an additional tool for some of those cases where there might not necessarily be as clear-cut public benefit argument, but yet there may be residents that we may want to provide this tool for where they otherwise wouldn't be able to address these issues. So they could still have something available to them to deal with some of these, other examples that I've shown here where they wouldn't be eligible for the grant program, but they might still benefit from the loan program. And those criteria as written in the ordinance are left up to the city's discretion, so they can be, we can use the same policy, but then I think, like you mentioned, we kind of get into the realm where it's like, well, why would you pick the grant over the loan then? So I think the intent would be to be, the main point would just be that lessen the strictness of requiring the public benefit and have that tool still available.
Deputy Mayor?
So I guess my question is, if somebody had an issue that was primarily on their property that was not, just something that wouldn't qualify for the grant side of things, and they're not able to handle that, what happens on the city's side of that? What happens with a property where they can't address, they don't have the tools needed to address whatever the issue is and it's causing flooding on their property? Does that become a code enforcement? Does that, does the city have a role at that point when somebody's property is just perpetually flooded? How does it affect the city when somebody isn't able to address that on their own property?
And in this question, it's not necessarily causing an impact to the public side either? So we're talking about just more
Yeah,
of
I'm talking about just something that would just be a straight loan. It's something that would only qualify on the loan side. Like, does it have other impacts to the city from an administrative standpoint? Do we end up doing code enforcement on somebody who has a big pond starting up in their front yard? I mean, are there other impacts that the city has to address, even if it's not getting on the public right away?
I mean, typically, if there's not a public facility being impacted, we wouldn't really need to move to code enforcement or require anything if it's just impacting private property. What we typically do and what the policies that we established in 2015-16 is, we will typically try and meet with them. We will often provide technical assistance. We will help them inspect the system, maybe try and troubleshoot what the issue actually is. And then that's kind of where our hands are tied after that point. We can't really actually do much after that point.
Unless it impacted safety for habitation, and then Brian Hampson's department would probably get involved.
Yeah, that's why I was clarifying. I mean, if it's not impacting anything, that would be, but exactly, if it was impacting something where there was a code issue, then we could go that route.
Councilmember Curtis?
So what are the funding levels for the grant and the loan program?
So in the current biennium budget, we actually established some budget for this programming, seeing that, we would establish it during this budget cycle. And we started with $45,000 annually, so $90,000 for the biennium budget. And that would be, so that pool of money, which actually also the ordinance would kind of formalize where that pool of money goes and where it sits. We would identify it as kind of a capital project, which we would just, this is the stormwater side repair program and loan program, and then that would be the pool of money that would fund both of these programs. Again, which would be currently set at $90,000 for the biennium.
To me, it feels like a grant and loan should be handled differently because the loan money will come back in. So it doesn't feel like that would be a long-term expense, only a short-term expense. So I don't quite understand how you can throw everything in one pool and use it for two different purposes, one of which comes back. Or am I just confused?
I mean, I don't think you're confused. We have, on the administrative side, we just felt it was just identifying one succinct amount of money for the program would just be easier to manage and implement. So if we could separate that, for instance, and do a loan, excuse me, one way and the grants the other way. It just makes it, so if we just kind of pulled the grant aside and just when it came up, we would go and do work, it would be, when do you say no, or how do you know when you've, if you're just sending your crews out and doing things as they come in, when do you really say, we've done enough for this year?
If you look at the two extremes, on the one hand, if it's $45,000 per year and it's all grants that year, the money's gone forever.
Correct.
If it's all loans that year, it all comes back to you. So I don't know, that just feels very different. One, it's gone forever, and one, it comes back to be used again. I just don't see how you can manage those in one pool.
Can I jump in? Well, we'll definitely track it in accounting, and so we're proposing that the $45,000 a year be budgeted as one lump program, because we don't yet have an idea of how much will go to the loan or how much from the grant, but our finance department will definitely track those two programs separately through accounting, and they'll set up separate accounts for those things. So I hope that addresses your concern. So they'll track the loan program in its own account, which will be separate from the grant program in a different account. But for budgeting purposes, we're proposing that it just be in a one lump sum amount.
Yeah, I think we'll deal with it as a biennial budget issue. If the money's gone, then we'll think about it for the next biennium, and if the money's still all there, then we'll reuse the same money.
Yeah, and to add to Rob's point, there's very little data out there to look at to see how much this might be used. So that the other thing is just we have to start implementing it and see. Maybe no one is even interested in loans and it's all grants or vice versa. So I think as we move forward and start getting some data on how this is being used, we'll be able to adjust in the future.
Thank you.
Councilmember Shrevenick.
Yeah, the other concern I have, I guess, is, I mean, do you have a sense of how much a typical drainage problem costs? I mean, my sense is, just from some personal experience, that there are many thousands of dollars potentially for a given project. You know, we got $45,000. I guess my thought is, you know, let's start small. We've got 45. Let's put it in the grant program, see what happens, see if there's any demand for the loan piece, you know, and have enough to do things well and to address the most important needs, which are going to be those ones that impact public safety and facilities. So.
Councilmember Marshall.
How are the loans going to be secured?
Yes.
How?
It's in the ordinance. If you go to the same page 184, you are going to be required, the terms of the loan are set forth, including the times, but they will be structured as a simple promissory note. It will have a 10-year period. It bears interest, and it'll be secured by the property.
If you could answer Councilmember Shrevenick's question about the typical cost of a repair, and there's a couple that are out there that we know of, ballpark. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, and I've actually, I think in the report, just all over the place. There it is. On the second page of the report, I've thrown a couple average costs out there, which were taken from a couple of our recent small works projects where we've gone out and just put in replaced some pipe, put in some catch basins. And so I've got a range in here from about $2,000 to $2,400, you know, to maybe to replace or install a catch basin, and $65 to $75 per foot to install some standard drainage pipe. And you know, and these are averages from a few different projects, but one thing, unfortunately, with drainage, you know, the local, there's many factors that are impacting that, because you know, if you're talking about putting in a pipe that's got 2 feet of cover on it through yard, that could be drastically different than if you're having to put, you know, a pipe 5 feet down and it's under manicured landscaping. Is it under patio? Is it under asphalt that has to be restored? So I would take those averages with a grain of salt.
But if someone had 100 feet of pipe that they needed to be replaced, it'd be in the $7,500 to $10,000 range.
Yeah, that could be a good typical average to use.
So that could, the $45,000 a year could fund 2, 3, 4 projects.
And again, and this is to the city too, so.
Yeah. Yeah, we were thinking that this program would fund a couple, 2, 3, 4 projects a year.
Yeah. And we're thinking more kind of just those conveyance projects where a pipe has failed or a catch basin has collapsed and we're just replacing some pipe and catch basin. So, you know, nothing real fancy.
Councilmember Smith.
Richard, do you see where it's multiple properties ever that are contiguous that have a similar problem or the same repair item at all? Or is it usually always just on one specific property?
I've seen a variety of actual problems. Do we have?
Well, maybe a better way is to tell what I'm wondering is if, let's say there were 3 properties together that all had the same issue, and maybe they were even going to work together. If one gets a loan, are we obligated to give the others a loan even if we don't have the money in the fund? Or how would we, I just don't know if we have a legal obligation to do something for the others, or what I know that's hypothetical, but I'm just trying to think of what's possible.
Well, I don't think with any of these circumstances we would have any legal obligation. I think if an issue came up, for instance, impacting multiple properties, and they wanted to resolve the issue, we could provide, I think there's different ways you could do it. One person could take a loan that they could work amongst themselves to figure out repayment on, or, and maybe Don can jump in if I'm wrong, or, if they wanted to get a bid and say 2 properties are dealing with a $10,000 problem, I don't see why we wouldn't be able to give each of them $5,000 loans so that they can work together and resolve the issue.
And then ultimately, I do concur, there is no legal requirement or responsibility of the city to give one person a loan because another property owner. It's really going to tie into, and what the ordinance is attempting to do is give the staff the flexibility to develop the criteria that will weight and score individual requests. And so perhaps if there is in fact multiple properties and they're pooling together, maybe that gives them additional weight for a higher score because they're working together to fix 3 parcels versus just one separate one. But again, the staff will take that back and develop criteria, much like your sidewalks, you score your sidewalks. That's the anticipation of developing that score for the loan program.
Great, thanks.
Any other questions, comments? Hearing none, the chair will entertain a motion to adopt ordinance number 19-0503, which establishes the Stormwater Conservation Loan Program and the Stormwater Sideline Repair Program. Is there a motion?
So moved.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Is there any further comments? Questions? Hearing none, the clerk please take the roll.
Mayor, I just realized this is the last time I'm going to call Councilmember Denuski,
Yes.
Councilmember Smith,
Yes.
Deputy Mayor Herbig,
Yes.
Mayor Baker,
Yes.
Councilmember Shrubnik,
No, for the caveat that I said.
Councilmember Marshall,
Yes.
Councilmember Curtis.
Yes.
Motion passes 6-1. All right.
You're not done.
Staff report.
Yeah, a couple things. So this coming Saturday morning, we have the 46th District Legislative Send-Off for our senator and 2 representatives. It's going to be here at Kenmore City Hall, 10 a.m. on Saturday, and I'm hoping I can get a good number of you to come. Do any of you know if you'll be able to make it? Can you? I'm seeing 4 of 5. Nice, thank you. All right, good, that's a good number. Yeah, we look forward to hearing from them, and that'll go for about 45 minutes, and then it'll be a 15-minute break, and then the 46th District delegation will then have a town hall meeting. But for the first part, we'll get to hear from them on what they're trying to do for Kenmore and for Lake Forest Park. It's going to be the 2 cities combined, and so we'll see the Lake Forest Park mayor and council here as well. And lastly, I just want to publicly thank Councilmember Smith and Councilmember Denuski for their service. It's been an absolute joy and thrill to work with them, and super rewarding. I just can't say enough about your dedication to the city and all the tireless hours you've put in. I've learned a great deal from both of you, and I just want to thank you for teaching me so much and showing me what it means to be a good elected representative and someone who truly cares about your community. And Stacey's done all these wonderful things for all the youth of our city, and the community build programs for the playgrounds, and and the Let's Move programs and Kaboom and all those things, the YMCA summer meals, it just goes on and on. And, you know, if Stacey is the champion of fun, Brent is the champion of pun. Brent has a gift when it comes to putting words together, and he always amazes me with the puns he's able to come up with. And he even coined walkways and waterways. I don't know if you guys knew that, but he had this aha moment where, you know, he saw the walkways and the waterways, and I remember him crossing his arms like this and saying walkways and waterways, and it stuck, and that's been the term we used for the campaign and everything. So there's been lots of fun moments with you all. And the way you've been able to call BS on things is amazing. I'll be talking with you, and I'll be heading in a certain policy direction, and then your eyes will wrinkle, both of you, and you'll go, and then I'll go, what? And then you'll say, but what about this and this? I'm like, oh yeah, okay. And so you guys have been really great in making sure we adopt good policy and thinking about all the stakeholders and all the what ifs. And I think people like you have made it so that good policy has been adopted at this council dais. And I appreciate all that you've done. So thank you.
All right, comments and initiatives. Last time for two of you. Councilmember Denuski.
I will miss all of you. This has been a really fun period in my life, and I've learned a lot. I've had a lot of fun, and happy holidays to everybody.
Councilmember Smith.
I'd love to have something profound to say, but I really don't. I guess I said it earlier, but I will miss all of you, and I won't miss 4-hour-plus meetings, but I will miss everything else about it. And the one thing I would add is there was a lot of really nice comments tonight. There was a lot of really well thought out, well articulated comments.
Councilmember Marshall.
I don't want to take it.
Thank you, Brent.
That means
Thank you,
finality.
Stacey.
Councilmember Curtis.
Nothing to add.
Councilmember Shrubnik.
Thank you both. It's been a great ride.
Deputy Mayor.
The only constant in life is change, and this change is one that, I don't know, I'm a little bittersweet about. I'm looking forward to working with new people, but going to a retreat without Brent busting out dad jokes is going to be a very different experience than I'm used to. On the upside, I won't have him saying the exact comments I was going to say 30 seconds later, so, get to talk a little bit more. And Stacey's contributions to the city are way beyond what most people think from just looking at council. I mean, the playground that my kid played at Kenmore Elementary is a huge legacy. I don't even remember where I first met you. It was probably at a build at Rhododendron or something. I can't remember, but you're just everywhere, and you've done so much for the city that a lot of people just haven't seen, and it's really impressive. And I know I'm going to see you around doing things. So because I just don't see you stopping doing things around the city to help out. But really want to thank both of you. Both have really added something to this council that I've appreciated.
I attended the tree lighting ceremony. It was a great event. More people come out every year. It was packed this year. This year we had 3 venues. It was pretty exciting, and great talent. Inglemoor High School jazz band #1 was here performing first. And they're an amazing group. Yeah. What do I say about the one who loves to pontificate? Yeah. You add so much to this. You really, really have over the years. I have grown used to seeking your guidance and wisdom. There's a great thought process going on up there along with the pun generation. You're an amazing guy, and it's been a really pleasure to know you. Not like I'm not gonna see you around anymore. Stacey, I remember when I first met you. You came up and talked to the city council meeting and you wanted some money for a playground at Kenmore Elementary. And then you talked to me about doing a park inventory. And one thing led to another, and all of a sudden we became a playful city. And then we started getting involved in the Secret Santa programs, which nobody contacted. And the school lunch program that migrated over here to Kenmore City Hall. I just think it adds so much to the character of the community to have the kids running through here. It's just amazing. You are a tremendous asset to the community. And I really, really appreciate you giving of your time the last few years to be part of this. I certainly understand that you have a job and you're coming up on an empty nest before long, and you need to make hay while you can. We appreciate that, and we're going to miss you, but I'm sure we're going to see you. So November 10th and 11th, for those of you who are remaining, we have a retreat. January. That's what I meant, not November. January 10th and 11th, and then the 13th is the ceremonial swearing in, where we can invite people off the street to swear us in, and it's fine. So thank you all. This is the last meeting for the year. I hope you all have great holidays, great Christmas, great New Year's. Be safe.